fascism they fiercely assail. In every speech it's the villain they unveil. From racism, patriarchy they rail. You know ain't nothing equity they prevail. Ushering in their Marxist utopias the end game. The turbulent strikes they aim to overthrow the old, establish their claim. With the vision they abolish everything. They need capitalism for the pain of clever life. These are the forms of the woke. Embedded in actions, words they evoke. From pushing equality to Marxist dreams in the dance of power, scheme and scheme. In every move, search and the please. Remember, nothing's ever as it seems. So, it's true and gain power, destabilize, bring capitalism into the monstrous utopia. That's what they want, that's what they want. Abolish capitalism. These are the portals of the woke. Embedded in actions, words they invoke. From pushing equality to Marxist dreams in the dance of power, scheme and scheme. In every move, search and the please. Remember, nothing's ever as it seems. So, it's true and true.
What up, what up? Happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube, on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, and on Rumble, where we talk about all sides of the culture war. We do deep dives into what the far left is doing. Sometimes we do deep dives into what the far right is doing. Today, we're going to be talking about the absolute nervous breakdown of one of the gods of the IDW, the former IDW. Does the IDW even exist anymore? The IDW hasn't even existed for a long ass time. The intellectual dark web. Woo. But when it did exist, which was a little bit before my time on the internet, Jordan Peterson was certainly at the top of it. Jordan Peterson was the hero. He was the man that said, what did he say? Make your bed, clean your room, and then change the lives of millions and millions and millions of young men all around the world. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Oh, how they have fallen. Oh, how the shills reveal themselves. And I gotta say, like, I know that people think I'm getting a little off track with looking at what Nick Fuentes is doing, looking at what the Groypers are doing, talking about Jordan Peterson, talking about some of the internet drama. But I actually think that it's right in line with what I should be doing, if I'm honest. Because here's the thing. And I've always said this isn't new information. The greatest obstacle that we face in terms of mounting any sort of cohesive strategy to beat back the institutional takeover of the left is the right. It's always been that way. And I've been talking about this for years and years and years. I talk about this every single time I do an undercover project and I break some news that no one else has, and it gets a bunch of views, but magically isn't covered in a certain set of the influencer sphere, because even though they'll steal my work and pretend they didn't get it from me, if it ever actually comes from me, they won't cover it, which has always been curious to me. And so then if I see this happening on the inside, if I see this happening and I know here are all the stories that the conservative right is not covering. I literally went on a self-managed abortion tour, complete with abortion shrine. I've seen the abortion shrine in person. The thing that they all talk about is this mystical thing. I've seen it. I was taught about it when I was undercover at a socialist conference. I have pictures of it. I know what's on it. I know their philosophy behind it. And I sent all this. And the reason I keep bringing this story up, because I've talked about this many times, it was absolutely mind boggling to me at the time that I literally went undercover at a socialist abortion conference. I went on a tour that they took over the faculty lounge at Hampshire College and made it all about abortion. And I learned how to give myself a self-managed abortion, complete with abortion doula and abortion shrine and all this stuff. And I have all this evidence and I put it all out there and I sent it to everyone. And no one cared. And this was something they couldn't really steal from me because I was the only one that had it, because I was actually in person at the event. No one covered it. These people who read about abortion all day, every day, never covered it. Same with autistic sex ed. When I infiltrated the autistic sex ed conference, and I'm the only person on the internet that actually has the training video of the autistic sex ed presentation that was presented by the University of Pittsburgh, or a graduate student at the University of Pittsburgh using the University of Pittsburgh's tools. It was also presented at the National Sex Ed Conference and was beamed into sex education classrooms all over the country. No one covered that, because apparently they didn't think that talking to autistic kids about how to masturbate and sex toys and all this stuff outside the presence of their parents, and maybe even their parents not knowing about it, wasn't actually something that was worthy of attention. And so we've had round and round and round with the conservative right and the influencer set and how this whole system works. And at first I was just really confused. I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm just not doing good enough work. Maybe it's like maybe there's just something I don't know. And then when it just kept happening over and over and over again, and then we got to the Socialism 2023 conference that I went undercover at, and I recorded the head of the American Library Association saying flat out that libraries need to be sites of Marxist organizing. This was one they couldn't actually avoid covering because it was a really big deal and it was around something with the news cycle. So what did they do instead of avoiding covering it? They stole my journalism. They just stole it and didn't credit it back to where it came from, even though it came from me. And I'm not bitter about any of this. I've worked out my feelings on this. I just bring this up because over the past several years, I've said repeatedly that the biggest obstacle that stands in our way to making any headway in regards to the left and what the left is doing is the conservative right. And it is the chosen, blessed influencers. And it is the people driving the narrative and driving the media cycle that only want their audiences to see the blessed people, hear the blessed ideas. And oftentimes the people that they're lifting up are raging morons that don't understand what they're talking about, that don't understand the left, that are not hinged into reality at all. But they look really nice and they clean up really nice, and they're very controllable is what they are. The influencers that are lifted up on the conservative right, they're the ones they can control. They're the ones that they can give a list of talking points to and saying, you will not deviate from these talking points. And they'll follow them because they make a lot of money doing it. They get famous. And that's really all they want. They want actors to play a part. This is why there are so many failed comedians and failed actors that get famous on the conservative right, because they are looking for actors to play their parts. That's it. That's all they're doing. And so I guess my point is that when we have the opportunity to expose the right for what it is, and to expose the hypocrisy of these influencers for what it is, I view that as relevant to what I'm doing. Are we doing a deep dive into the far left today? No, we're not. We'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow's happy hour. We always do that on happy hours for Fridays. We'll have beer and everything. But I view it as a necessary part of this to expose the absolute bullshit that's going on the conservative right. And listen, man, I don't have a huge platform. I don't. I don't have a huge platform. I don't have a huge audience. If you talk to many people, like I'm completely irrelevant. And to be honest, I kind of like being irrelevant. If I'm really blunt, being irrelevant allows me to fly under the radar with so much stuff. I wouldn't be able to get away with the undercover stuff that I get away with if I was more relevant. Like, I'm already kind of known on the left. They know who I am. They know who I'm a troublemaker. They look at for me at these events and stuff like that. I know all that. So I'm not out for relevance or anything like that. That's not why I'm saying this. I'm saying it because I can only do what I can do, and I think that I'm not going to make the difference in any of this. But do you know who could make the difference? Nick Fuentes could. Nick Fuentes has the apparatus to make a difference. Nick Fuentes has the influence to make a difference. Nick Fuentes has the relevance to make a difference. He has the figurative and perhaps literal, but I don't know that, the figurative balls to make a difference. He doesn't follow the talking points. He has built his entire own platform, so he can't be canceled. Like, no matter what, Nick Fuentes will keep talking, and he will have an audience on the internet no matter what they do to him. He's figured it all out because he had to. And a lot of people have a certain perception about, like, Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. And listen, man, I once had that perception about them. I did. I used to drag Nick on this channel. We used to have a good old time dragging Nick and the Groypers. And then October 7th happened, and things changed. And I saw things differently. And the thing of it is I don't even know why people are surprised by this necessarily. I mean, how did I even end up doing this? I was a Democrat for 20 years. That in 2019, I wouldn't say that I just got red pilled after October 7th. I think there are different levels of red pill. On the JQ, pretty much on the JQ after October 7th, it was percolating before that. But it was kind of one of those things that before October 7th on the JQ specifically, I was avoiding. I was like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. And we'll talk about that. I was really avoiding it, but it was kind of like seeds had percolated, but I was focusing on other things. I think there are different levels of red pill that you can take. The first time I red pill was in 2019. And that was how I ended up in this whole space to begin with. And because social justice took over my knitting community. Everyone knows this story, or everyone that's been around probably knows this story. Most people found me because of this story. And I was a Democrat for 20 years. I didn't ever think anything of it. I really wasn't paying attention to politics. I hated politics at that time. There were times in my life when I was really into it. And then once Barack Obama got elected, I turned my brain off to politics. I just wasn't thinking about it anymore. And then once Donald Trump got elected, I cried. And then I kind of got over it pretty quickly. And I was like, well, life goes on, whatever. I just wasn't paying attention. And then all of a sudden, social justice takes over my knitting community. Ruined everything. Made everything suck. One day we were talking about yarn. The next day we were being forced to confess our inherent racism. Made everything suck. And so I was like, what the fuck is going on? I'm a psychologist. I like to understand social systems. That's why I became a psychologist. I'm not a clinical psychologist in that I don't diagnose things. I don't treat patients. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist in that I spent years working in businesses to help them basically figure out how to get groups of people to work together better and be more productive and be happier and stuff like that. And what that involves doing is analyzing social systems. And the most fun part of being an industrial organizational psychologist is you basically get to be puppet master. You basically have to go into organizations and you have all these people that like, you're not the boss of them, but you kind of can tell them what to do. And you get to go, here's what you need to do to work with this person. Here's what you need to do to work with that person. And you try to like, and you kind of like try to maneuver the whole thing to get them to figure out how to actually behave like human beings. And it is a little bit like being a puppet master, and it's fun. And I like doing that sort of stuff. I'm very, very good at analyzing social systems. And this is why I tend to be right about things, because this is just my background. I learned how to do this. I practiced it in the real world, and that's just the way it goes. But so when social justice took over my knitting community, like, my natural inclination is to be like, what the hell happened? And to try to reverse engineer it. And so I started challenging myself to listening to all these people who I thought I would disagree with on the political right. And my big culminating moment was I went to a Trump rally, and then lo and behold, I found out, wow, Trump supporters aren't who I thought they were. And I changed my mind and I wrote an essay about it on the internet. And then it went all over the fucking internet and went viral. And I was on all these news shows, and I became like this conservative darling for a year. And I was trotted out to like all these things and all that. And and I say that, not that most people don't know that story, because I think most people do know that story, but it's a little bit bizarre to me that people think that I ever stopped searching for information. Like, people on the right seem to think that as soon as I left the left, that was it. I decided the left was bad. I decided I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And people think that when I left the left, that I just stopped. I never stopped looking for information. I was always kind of like going around going, "What's going on? What's going on?" After Joe Biden got into office, I started seeing the conservatives change in a direction that I didn't. Oh yeah, I did that PragerU video. Yo, I tweeted this morning, but let me tell you what, that PragerU video is one of the things that I regret most of anything that I've done. That was a mistake. And, like, I reverse engineered all that. Like, how that happened was, like, Dave Rubin was one of the first people that found me after my article went viral, and then he kind of, like, little bit took me under his wing, and then I think he was the one that pulled me into the PragerU stuff and recommended me for that, and it was just this weird thing, and, like, I really do regret it, though. I mean, like, listen, man, the reason I did a PragerU video is after my story went viral, I had thousands of messages from people. Just all like messages I was getting from email and LinkedIn and on the DMs and all this stuff. And I had never had I like nothing like this had ever happened to me before. And I had thousands of messages from people going, "Thank you for telling your story. You've given me hope that I can reconnect with my family again." And all of a sudden, I have PragerU coming to me and they say, "Carlin, we want to tell your story to a bigger audience." And I didn't really want to do it because I don't like being on video. Like, I know this is ironic. I do YouTube for a living, right? I don't like being on video. I don't like actually being a public person. But it's kind of the cards I've been dealt. And so I'm rolling with it. I'm making the best of it. I'm doing what I can with it, right? And so PragerU comes along and they said, "You have complete approval over the script. We want to tell your story." And I got to give them credit. They did tell my story, but at the same time, I wish I had never trusted them. Dennis Prager used my story all over the place in 2020 and in 2021. I even met Dennis Prager at Dave Rubin's house one day. He gave me a big old hug, all this stuff. And I think the reason that they did this, I think the reason they did this is they all thought that I was someone that they could control. Because I was just like this random person. I never actually wanted to do this. I think that they just thought I would be very compliant and like happy to be there. And I think they thought they could control me. And then I started saying things that they didn't like. And then I started tweeting things that they found inconvenient. And the minute that I tweeted something that PragerU didn't like, they planted a fucking hit piece on me in Newsweek. I am absolutely 100% convinced that it was PragerU that planted that fucking hit piece on me in Newsweek, or someone connected to PragerU. I am 100% convinced of that. And that was some bullshit, man. That was some bullshit that literally all I did, oh yeah, oh yeah, big time. This happened back in 2021, big time, bro. Big time. And so they took a tweet. Essentially, what happened is this is the infamous Hitler went to heaven tweet where I was in the middle of a 2-hour spiritual conversation, which the point I was making was God loves everyone unconditionally, and I don't think hell exists. Like, this is literally the point I was making. I don't believe hell exists. I think God loves everyone unconditionally, no matter what they do. I think that we are all here for a purpose, and we are all here to have certain experiences. And I tweeted it in a little bit of a trolly way. I'll admit that. But ultimately, the point I was literally making is God loves everyone unconditionally, no matter what they do in life. I never said Hitler was a good person. I never questioned the Holocaust. I never said the Holocaust was a good event. I never said anything like that. Those thoughts weren't even in my mind at that point. They weren't even, it wouldn't have even occurred to me. And then this tweet gets taken out of context in the middle of like a 2-hour spiritual conversation, gets massively blown up on the internet. I have a hit piece written on me in Newsweek saying that I like called for like like the death of the Jews or some shit, which never fucking happened. PragerU took down my PragerU video and quietly canceled me and like blocked me on everything. And so this is why I say I personally, and man, I could be wrong, I am personally convinced that someone connected to PragerU planted that hit piece in Newsweek on me and dropped a boat ton of bullshit in my life for no good reason. All because I tweeted something that they didn't like. When I never worked for them, I never got a paycheck from them. I wish they had fucking paid me for that shit. I had, no joke, I had like one of the top 3 PragerU videos of 2020. I wish I'd gotten paid for that shit. Anyway, it's a long roundabout way of saying that that I've tried to tell people for a long time what bullshit the conservative right is. I've tried to tell people a long time that that the influencers and like the media organizations and like all this stuff, they don't actually care about the truth. They don't care about solving the problem. They don't care about what's going on in reality. Most of them don't even know what's going on in reality. All they care about is shilling a narrative. And I think that since October 7th, that has become very, 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 very clear to a lot of people that maybe it wasn't clear to already. And we're going to talk about that some more because I do want to talk about October 7th specifically today, but where we are going to start is with Jordan Peterson and Mikhaila Peterson and the man himself, the king himself, Nick Fuentes. Now, this tweet here is Nick Fuentes responding to Mikhaila Peterson. Let's just go back. Let me do a quick arc of how we got to where we are today. What day was this? Let's see. On July 6th, 5 days ago, Mikhaila Peterson, who is the daughter of Jordan Peterson, tweeted something to the effect of, anyone who calls Jews rats should be censored on X. And yeah, so this is what happened. So the first thing that happened is Dr. Lupus, who I don't really know, but she follows me on Twitter, but I don't really know her, but she seems like a nice enough lady, but I don't really know her. Dr. Lupus tweeted something out about, and I know I missed some super chats. I'll get to them in a sec. I apologize. Dr. Lupus tweeted something out about like all the people who own porn websites are Jewish just by pure coincidence. Like everyone who owns a major porn website happens to be Jewish, which is just like factual information, right? And in response to that, Mikhaila Peterson basically started to go off that she didn't want any of this Nazi shit in her feed and that she thought that Twitter should start censoring the people who are doing this because she doesn't want to see this Nazi stuff. And anyone who calls Jews rats should be censored on Twitter. Now, this is a little bit bizarre because, as you remember, Jordan Peterson back in the day literally made his brand off of this idea that we should not be censoring speech. This was Jordan Peterson's entire entryway into this world. He was a college professor in Canada, and Canada wanted to compel him to use certain pronouns. And Jordan Peterson didn't want to use those pronouns. Jordan Peterson didn't want to be told what to say. And so Jordan Peterson literally said, I doth protest. So his entire entryway into this was telling people we should not be censoring language that we do not like. Had this whole rise as like one of the leaders in the intellectual dark web, wrote all these books, did a world tour, did all this stuff, made tens of millions of dollars, said things like, Jordan Peterson used to say things like, in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. Jordan Peterson used to be against compelled speech. Do we all remember this? Well, fast forward several years, and now Jordan Peterson works for the Daily Wire, and that means that Israel is paying him money. And Jordan Peterson's gonna be changing his tune because he used to be against compelled speech, and his daughter I think usually used to be against compelled speech as well. But now that they're making all this Israeli money from the Daily Wire, they've started to change their tune just a little bit. Isn't that funny? Yeah, so she deleted her original post that she made. She originally tweeted something to the effect of that X should be censoring people who call Jews rats. And this was a surprise to Nick Fuentes because Jordan Peterson had literally called Nick Fuentes a psychopathic rat less than a week before this. Now listen, man. I've been following Nick Fuentes pretty closely since October 7th. I'm not going to say that Nick Fuentes hasn't always been a bit precocious. Okay, Nick Fuentes has been in this game a long time. He started very young. Young men will be young men. Young men will say precocious things. But I really feel like, and I've said this and we talked about this the other day, I really feel like Nick has evolved in the past year or so. Like you can kind of see him stepping into this role. He's taking it more seriously. He's got a new studio. He's even wearing better ties. God willing, he keeps the streak going tonight. So I'm not going to say that I think Nick Fuentes has always behaved perfectly, but I think that he's actually done a pretty decent job of being relatively even keeled since October 7th. And it's kind of like if there was any time in which Nick Fuentes really could go off the rails, it probably would have been October 7th, and it wasn't. And so for Jordan Peterson, world-renowned psychologist, the savior of young men, to come in and call Nick Fuentes a psychopathic rat, all because Nick Fuentes tweeted the word Jews. Like, seriously, that's all that happened. That's literally all that happened. Nick Fuentes tweets the word Jews. Jordan Peterson, who makes all his money today from the Israelis, says, you are a psychopathic rat. Okay. And then Mikhaila Peterson comes out and says, we should be censoring people who are calling Jews rats on Twitter. And it just seemed a bit contradictory. So a lot of people kind of, piled on Mikhaila for that. And then Jordan Peterson wrote an entire sonnet. I think this is a sonnet. I don't really understand the proper definitions of poetry because I don't like poetry. Poetry is something that I have never understood the appeal of poetry. I've tried. I took a poetry class in college and everything. I hated it. It sucked. I don't like poetry. But Jordan Peterson lately is writing in this like sonnet type poetry form, which is also weird. And he decided to respond to Nick Fuentes by writing a poem. He said, I apologize for calling you a rat, Nick Fuentes. Rats are just animals. They happen to be an enemy of mankind. So they are like you in that regard, but they are merely acting on instinct. Whereas you are motivated by a willful ignorance so deep that it's kind of a miracle, in combination with a profound malevolence. So I was unfair to the rats. Hence my apology. Take note, Mikhaila. And then he continues. He wasn't done with the poem yet. He said, I don't regret the psychopath moniker, however. You and your followers, I know your type, buddy boy, but you don't know mine. Finally, I hope with all my heart that you reap the full benefit of the stunningly vile company you keep, attract, cultivate, and deserve. World-renowned psychologist right there. Has made tens of millions of dollars being the savior of young men right there. Calling someone that he has never even spoken to a psychopath, calling him malevolent, calling him vile, speaking about all the people around Nick as though they are the lowest form of human being. Yeah, I think that Jordan Peterson is a little triggered. Just a smidge. Just a smidge. And then Mikhaila Peterson comes back because Mikhaila Peterson deleted the first thread and then she had a conversation with Daddy. And so then Mikhaila Peterson posted a whole other thread and she said, Dad called me last night, probably worried I was upset by the X drama. I'm not. Yeah, okay, sure, Mikhaila. He said it was better to have less moderation even on Nazi posts so that other people can see it. I get the slippery slope argument too. It's just strange seeing Nazis. My concern is people are too dumb to see that screaming Jews are filth is the same as what the Nazis did. They'll fall for propaganda like an entire nation did 100 years ago. X's ecosystem is not representative of how these people would be viewed in the real world. Most of them would be beat up in high school. Doesn't this kind of make Mikhaila Peterson sound like an elitish, snobbish bitch? Most of the Groypers would get beat up in high school. And Mikhaila Peterson was part of the cool kids clique in high school that would never lower herself to be around the lowly Groypers. And it's like this right here, this is the entire problem that the Groypers have with women, all wrapped up in one neat little bow in the form of Jordan Peterson's daughter. But the strengths of the groups online literally spreads to the real world, and this anti-Jew ideology is a seriously dangerous ideology. Seriously, guys? In the real world, I'm working on my own company by my pool. Well, no, she's not working on her own company. She's working for Daddy's company. 99.9% of the people commenting are 35-year-old dudes somewhere basement-like, using rumors, insults to try to change people's perception of me who aren't successful and very resentful of it. Listen, man, listen. It is true that a lot of the Groypers are young. They're not teenagers. I mean, there are some, teenagers that listen, I suppose, but the ones that I've met aren't teenagers, but they're young. They're Zoomers. They're young. But it is also true that there are Groypers that are older, that are very successful, that make a lot of money, that are married, that have kids, that are actually just kind of concerned about the way things are going. So for Mikhaila Peterson to generalize about all the gripers and saying they're just unsuccessful basement dwellers, that's just not true, man. I've met some of these people in person. It's simply just not true. And again, going back to like the arc of my story, of being someone that like I go out into the real world and I'm like, I actually want to know what's happening. I don't want to know the gossip. I don't want to know the rumor. I learned my lesson with the Trump rally when I went to the Trump rally and I found out that none of these people were who they thought who I thought they were based on like the media and my friends and all that stuff. So like I don't take anyone's word for it nowadays. Guess what I did? A month ago, I went to AFPAC, which is Nick Fuentes' event. I went in person. I met the people there. And guess what? They aren't what people say they are. Anyway, I digress. The fact that people can't see this pro-Palestinian movement has spread from people being anti-war in Gaza to anti-Jew everywhere really quickly is insane. I'm worried about the safety of my Jewish friends. I still think the anti-Jew pros floating around this platform should fall under hate speech. And that's already moderated on X. And I know that classification is tricky. Where's the line? What's hate speech? I mean, I would say, personally, I would say that if you made your career and you made your money off of the idea that we shouldn't be censoring speech that we disagree with, I would say probably we shouldn't even be throwing out the idea that hate speech exists. Because hate speech is usually just speech that someone doesn't like. The First Amendment does not exist to protect speech that you agree with. It exists to protect speech that you disagree with. Hate speech is not real. Stating facts about Jewish people that people don't like is not hate speech. Stating facts about the government of Israel that you don't like is not anti Semitic. Pointing out that Israel is perpetrating a literal genocide in Gaza right now is not anti Semitic. And I could go on and on and on and on and on with examples. But the line for me is if the speech that you're using is not going to result in like the imminent death or harm of another person. And by imminent, I mean you are literally giving the order to like hurt someone physically with violence, not emotionally, physically, then it falls under the First Amendment, man. And if you don't like the speech, don't listen to it. It's really that simple. No one is forcing anyone to listen to people that they disagree with. However, calling for those people to be censored, especially when you have literally made tens of millions of dollars off of the idea that people shouldn't be censored and speech shouldn't be compelled, it just seems a little hypocritical to me. But because we just went through this with the Nazis in a world war, we could remember that this topic is touchy for the droves of morons that would rather be resentful at successful people than work harder. Mikhaila Peterson seems to be under some delusion that she doesn't work for daddy. Mikhaila Peterson seems to be under some delusion that she's this insane, successful businesswoman that's just entirely self made and doesn't work for daddy's company. I used to think Mikhaila Peterson was a lot smarter than what she was. I really did. I don't know why I thought this. I never really listened to her, but like, I used to have this perception of her that she was at least like a little bit smart. And then she just started talking. And then apparently she went to Romania and fucked Andrew Tate. And God knows, I mean, that seems to be about the level of intelligence in which she deserves. But you know what? We're not going to talk about that right now. And she works for daddy's company and she gets paid by daddy and the Daily Wire. And has she ever actually had a job in real life? Has she ever actually built anything on her own that's not connected to daddy? And she feels like she's this amazing businesswoman and that everyone else is just resentful of her success because she lucked out and worked for daddy. Isn't that the way it is with women all the time? It's like you think everything's fine and then they start talking. Every time. Every single time. I don't think X is representative of society. I think of an area of its growing Nazism. I like a lot of conspiracy theories, but not this one. This one is bred on stupidity and or resentment and resulted in so many deaths. So Mikhaila Peterson doesn't like Nazis. All right. And then she just kept going because Sam Parker tweeted about this whole thing. And then, oh, here's the original tweet that Mikhaila sent. Yes, I think the Nazis on X equating Jews with rats and using hashtags like hashtag filth should have more content moderation or censorship. No, I'm not retracting that statement. Yeah, she actually deleted a tweet in which she said, I'm not retracting this statement. And then it kind of seems like she's later retracted it. And so then Sam tweeted at her, being like, why'd you retract your tweet, Mikhaila? And then she said, being ratioed by Nick Fuentes illustrates my point that X is popularizing a dangerous ideology by not grouping Nazi posts in with hate speech. Already moderated. I didn't delete the original post from fear. I expanded on it. It's pinned. That's the thread we just read. Because moderation is a tricky topic. Also, Nazism is a bad long-term strategy, Sam, especially for a senator. And then actually she responded to me on this one because I said, Mikhaila, X should censor people who call Jews rats. Nick, your father called me a rat last week. Mikhaila, that's just proof we need to censor Nazis, you Nazi. And I said, lady, do you even heal yourself? And Mikhaila responded to me, yay. I ratioed her good. Look at this. 3,300 likes to 8,100 likes from me. And I got significantly less views. She got 2.1 million views on this. I got 87,000. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then Mikhaila responded and she said, I'm using the term rat as an example, obviously. Either way, referring to Nick Fuentes as a rat isn't the same thing as referring to an entire group of people as rats and filth. Guys, just keep this in mind. Everyone keep this in mind. I want everyone just to put this in their back pocket. We're going to come back to it later. Mikhaila Peterson says, referring to Nick Fuentes as a rat isn't the same thing as referring to an entire group of people as rats and filths. Put it in your back pocket. We're going to come back to it. The fact that I have to explain this to someone who has doctor in their name is concerning. Well, Mikhaila, I'll tell you this. Unlike you, when I built my industrial organizational psychology practice, I didn't have daddy backing me. So I feel pretty okay about my credentials and my success rate because I did it without daddy, without riding daddy's coattails the entire way. And then Nick ratioed her ass too. And he said, you and your father have championed free speech for years, but now you demand censorship because Dr. Lupus posted a fact that you don't like, and then you call everyone Nazis. Have you considered that you got ratioed because you're a hypocrite and a fraud? Apropos, Nick. And then Mikhaila responded to me again. She thought she was responding to Lauren Chen. This was actually pretty hilarious because I retweeted Lauren Chen's video about this. And Lauren Chen said in this video about this that she would love to see a debate between Nick Fuentes and Jordan Peterson. I think that would be great too, by the way. If you would like to see a debate between Nick Fuentes and Jordan Peterson, can you please mount the like button for me? That'd be pretty great. On YouTube right now, I have a shocking disparity between the number of people watching and the number of people who've mounted that like button. So can we all just take a minute? If you would like to see a debate between Nick Fuentes and Jordan Peterson, please mount the like. If you don't feel comfortable mounting the like because you've just met the like and you're just getting to know the like button, you can give the like button a high five. You can put your arm around the like button. You can hold hands with the like button. You can give the like button a kiss on the cheek. You can do whatever you want, but just please do something to the like button. While I'm waiting to see those like numbers go up, 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 let me take some super chats. Naruto says, by Jordan Peterson's own words, his own tweet calling Groypers rats should be censored. Yeah, we're going to get to that, Naruto. Absolutely. Also, where is Dave Rubin to defend his friend? You know, it's funny that you ask about Dave Rubin because I checked out Dave Rubin's timeline today. Now, I'm blocked by Dave Rubin on my main account because several months ago, I told Nick Fuentes that Dave Rubin was calling around to people's jobs trying to get them fired because I had heard about it from like 3 different people. And I pondered what to do with that information when I started hearing from people that Dave Rubin was calling people's jobs trying to get them fired for not having the right position on Israel. I pondered what to do with that information, and then I decided to DM it to Nick Fuentes. And then Nick Fuentes talked about it on his show. And he said, Dave Rubin's calling around people's jobs. Oy vey. And I clipped that and I put it on Twitter and I tagged Dave Rubin in it. And Dave Rubin was upset with me for that. And we got into a little argument. And I said, Dave, I'm sure you would never try to get people fired for speech you disagree with. Don't burn this book, bro. You're in charge of the free speech platforms. I'm sure you would never do this, Dave. And Dave was like, why didn't you talk to me first, Carlin? And I was like, Dave, I haven't talked to you in over 2 years after that whole scenario where PragerU planted a hit piece on me, bro. Where the fuck have you been? I don't owe you anything. And then Dave Rubin said, this conversation is done, and he blocked me. Anyway, Dave Rubin blocked me on Twitter. So I had to go under my handy sock account to go look at Dave Rubin's Twitter. And the reason I bring that up is that it's funny because Dave Rubin hasn't said anything about any of this. Dave Rubin isn't talking about this at all. Dave Rubin's not talking about and defending his good friend Jordan Peterson. Wasn't Dave Rubin on tour with Jordan Peterson? Wasn't that like a thing? Like, didn't Jordan Peterson have like so much to do with making Dave Rubin millions and millions of dollars? And now Jordan Peterson's getting attacked by the evil Nick Fuentes. And all of a sudden, Dave Rubin isn't saying shit. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? Anyway, thanks, Naruto, for the super chat. Stu Studio uploaded a trading yesterday of the left planning a march on the RNC. Oh, we'll watch that tomorrow. That's a great find. We'll definitely make sure to watch that. Big Con was actually a real thing. It's too bad it took someone like Crowder to sound the alarm and Big Con reacted. I'm not sure that Crowder's someone that I would idolize, but certainly Crowder did a great job in exposing the Daily Wire, and so we'll give Crowder respect for that. Mikhaila should hear what the Eastern Orthodox moms are on Twitter saying about her. They're not impressed with her at all. Oh, can you tag me in some of those tweets? I would love to see those. Can you send those to me in a DM? I'm Dr. Carlin B on Twitter. Can you send them to me in a DM or tag me in them in something? Because I would actually love to see that. I bet Mikhaila checks under the bed for the Nazis that leak in her imagination. Will you be on a show with Adam? I think you did well together. With Adam Green? I don't know, man. Like, I like Adam Green. I don't have anything against Adam Green. I know the Groypers don't like Adam Green, but that's not my fight. I'm not choosing. I'm not taking sides. I really like Adam. But I have some issues that I'm working out with a friend of Adam's that I would really like to work out those issues, but it's not going so hot in working out those issues. And so I don't know if that's even up. There is interpersonal bullshit that doesn't actually involve Adam, but Adam's kind of involved because of connections and stuff like that. And I don't know. I don't know. I hope we can in the future. I like him a lot. I don't have anything against him. A haiku for Dr. Carlin. Wisdom shared freely. Carlin's voice strong and clear now. Path to truth she shows. Hey, thank you, Joshua. Thank you for everyone who sent it a super chat so far. I really do appreciate it. So let's continue with our arc, shall we? So we've got Lauren Chen putting out this video saying that she would like to see a debate between Jordan Peterson and Nick Fuentes. And then Mikhaila Peterson responds to me saying, but she thinks she's responding to Lauren Chen. And she said, literally everything my dad does is more important than debating that Nimnal. It's not going to happen. Nice video, by the way. Thanks for the DM. Prior to posting, I actually liked you. Siding with the anti-Semites is not only immoral, it's not going to age well on social media. Ayahuasca or Cambo Frog? Oh, God. Ayahuasca and Cambo Frog are two completely different ceremonies. They're two completely different spiritual experiences. I mean, it really depends on what you want your thing to be. Like, Cambo Frog is like a once in a while type of thing, man. Cambo Frog is intense. Cambo Frog hurts. You get holes burned in your arm with a stick. You get frog poison put on it. Your whole body, like your immune system gets completely reset. You feel great afterwards. But Cambo Frog is not like an everyday thing, okay? Ayahuasca, I've done multiple ayahuasca ceremonies in a weekend. So, like, probably, like, right now, honestly, I want to do both again. I really do want to do Cambo Frog again, though, because you really do feel great afterwards, but I haven't done Cambo Frog in years. But, like, on the regular, probably ayahuasca, but every once in a while, I would do Cambo Frog. Anyway, and then Nick ratioed her as well. Lauren Chen responded to her. Nick also, you have to scroll down sometimes to see Nick because he doesn't have a blue check. Nick also says, it won't happen because you both have nothing, no arguments. You point and sputter about anti-Semitism, calling for censorship. Your father is supposed to be a fearless intellectual powerhouse, yet everyone knows he would never dare sit with me because he might lose. And yeah, that's exactly right. Jordan Peterson would actually lose to Nick Fuentes, and it wouldn't even be close. And that's why Jordan Peterson won't debate Nick Fuentes, because he would absolutely lose. And so all this happened, and then last night, Mikhaila Peterson puts out a video. And we're not going to watch the whole video, because I watched the whole thing last night. And in part of the video, in the second half of the video, Mikhaila Peterson is basically justifying her and her father getting addicted to psychiatric drugs and talking about how hard addiction is. And I'm listening, man, I'm not going to diminish addiction. Addiction is hard, especially when you're talking about prescription drugs. I understand that. I don't want to do like an own on people on that. I think it's a very sad thing that Jordan Peterson and Mikhaila Peterson have so many mental health issues and immune issues and all of these other things. And I think it's really, really sad that Jordan and Mikhaila Peterson were on psychiatric medications for a long ass time. And then I think it's a happy thing that they decided that they could just eat all meat, and that managed to regulate the need for them to be on psychiatric medication. But I think the all meat diet is like wearing off. I don't think the all meat diet is working anymore because Jordan Peterson is acting insane. And I'm going to prove that. But before I prove that, we're going to watch the video that Mikhaila Peterson put out last night, or at least part of the video. And we're going to talk about it. So guys, this is the world's most successful businesswoman ever, Mikhaila Peterson. There is no one in the world that is more successful and better at her job than Mikhaila Peterson. And Mikhaila Peterson is going to talk to us about Nazis and censorship and Nazis and her father and more Nazis and being the best businesswoman in the world, and then more Nazis again. And so let's hear what she has to say.
Hey guys, over the weekend I was scrolling around X and I was being spammed with Nazi content to an unnerving degree. Not that one post isn't bad enough, but I've pressed not interested on so many anti-Semitic posts, it's ridiculous. And I'm not defining Nazi content by the liberal definition of Nazi, but real Jew-hating spam on X. So
don't you just love the ominous background music? It's like Nazi, Nazi,
So it's been all over my feed. Not from people I follow, by the way, just random posts. It makes me think these accounts are being funded by Iran, honestly, but that's a topic for another time, and I have no evidence of that.
All of the Nazis on Twitter are being funded by Iran. Can I get some Iran bucks? I was accused for years of getting funded by PragerU, and I got no PragerU bucks. Can I get some Iran bucks? I've been tweeting stuff about the Holocaust lately. I've been tweeting stuff about the Holocaust for like the past 2 days. Can I get some funding from Iran, please? Does anyone else in the chat want to admit to being funded by Iran? Are there any groypers here who want to make a confession? Like, have you been to the Middle East lately? Like, what?
And it bothered me this weekend. I've been stressed because we're launching Peterson Academy, and I've been working all the time, and I don't know why I would go on X to let loose, but bad idea. It should bother any reasonable person. So I tweeted out one of these posts and said a few things. So first there was this one. And then when I started getting attacked online for the first post, which I thought was obviously anti-Semitic and anybody would think so, but like wham, thousands of negative comments.
Wait, let's actually look at the post that she said was obviously anti-Semitic. Okay, so here is the post that was obviously anti-Semitic, which she only shows for like 2 seconds, and she doesn't even show the full post. Literally all Dr. Lupus is saying is who owns porn websites? Who owns OnlyFans? Who owns Pornhub? There were a couple other sites. That's all it was. Who owns these porn sites? And they all happen to be Jewish. But apparently it's anti-Semitic to point out that OnlyFans and Pornhub are owned by Jews.
And then when I started getting attacked online for the first post, which I thought was obviously anti-Semitic and anybody would think so, but like wham, thousands of negative comments, I tweeted out this, which I ended up deleting because it wasn't worded properly, honestly. So let me clarify. I shouldn't have used the word censor. I should have been more careful with that word because it's not exactly what I meant. It's hard to believe that if I'm not over the top clear in my communication randomly on X, it matters enough that it can go viral. That's still weird for me.
Didn't her father write about being precise in your language? Isn't that something that Jordan Peterson actually preached? To be precise in your language? Am I making that up? And now Mikhaila Peterson is shocked that when she's calling for literal censorship on X, that people are offended by that?
That obviously has the same problem. Most of my tweets don't go viral. What I meant was if I don't follow Nazis on X, I don't want their posts all over my feed, and the algorithm shouldn't be pushing these posts. Not that they shouldn't have the freedom to post it.
Thank you, Nathan.
And that
I agree.
censor as in don't artificially push their posts, not disallow users from posting whatever they want. So I should have said, I don't want Nazi posts pushed by the algorithm, not censor Nazis. There's a difference between freedom of speech and freedom of reach. So yes, that tweet didn't reflect my views as perfectly as it should have. I was honestly quite irritated by all the Nazis responding to my original post and not paying attention as much as I should have. Anyway, Nick Fuentes, I don't know because I don't care, a well-known anti-Semitic boy went after me along with his thousands of anti-Semitic followers because I said that people who
Nick Fuentes is 25 years old. That's a man.
Use the hashtag filth or rats when referring to an entire nation of people should be censored. Like I said, this was after I got attacked for retweeting a medical doctor who had the original anti-Semitic post.
Oh, so here's the full post. Here is the full anti-Semitic post. We'll look at that in a second. I just want to grab this super chat. I'm sorry to hear there's conflict and you're able to resolve, and hope you're able to resolve it soon. And we see you on Adam's show again soon. Look up anti-racist Hitler. Thank me later. I will look that up. And like I said, I have no beef with Adam. I actually don't feel like I even, I won't get into it. I'm not going to get into it. But like, I don't actually have a beef with Adam. But there are other people involved. And I wish it wasn't that way. Anyway, So here's the actual full tweet that Mikhaila Peterson says is anti-Semitic. Who owns OnlyFans? This Jewish guy. Who owns the most porn websites? This rabbi. And I can't pronounce their name, so I'm not even going to try to. Who founded Tinder? Another Jewish guy. Who founded Grindr? Another Jewish guy. Who founded Bumble? A Jewish woman. And then it had pictures. How's that anti-Semitic? And this is the issue, guys. Listen, I'm old enough to remember when the left called every single thing in the world that it didn't like racism. I wrote a book about this a couple years back. It's called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. A lot of it still holds up today. If you feel like picking up a copy of it, you can find it in the link below or on Amazon or any of those things. But I'm old enough to remember when everything in society was deemed to be racist. And everyone who didn't want to do anti-racist training was called a racist. And everyone who didn't want to post a black square in their Instagram was called a racist. And now you're telling me that you can point out that Jews own porn businesses and that piece of information is considered to be anti-Semitic? Nah, I don't buy it. No.
Retweeting it in a negative way. Again, I meant these people's content shouldn't be pushed by the algorithm. I shouldn't have said censored. And Nick Fuentes responds with, your dad called me a rat. And I would like to clarify, I think calling individuals rats or whatever is fine, particularly if they are rat-like. I think it's different when you're referring to an entire nation of people as rats that have been subject to, say, Hitler less than 100 years ago, when the Nazis of the 1930s also referred to those people as rats as attackers.
Okay, so again, this is the second time we've heard this from Mikhaila Peterson now. It's okay to call individuals rats. It is not okay to call groups of people rats. So everyone, put it in the back pocket. We're going to come back to that later.
Tactic to breed disgust. So yeah, I think referring to Jews as rats is completely different than referring to Nick Fuentes as a rat. And if you can't understand the differentiation, I can't help. Social media really allows views to propagate unnaturally. If some of these anti-Semitic tweets were spoken in an ordinary public setting, the individual would be being punched. But then these views grow and their followers go out into public thinking everyone agrees with that view. I don't think freedom of speech is the same thing as being pushed by an algorithm. I shouldn't have to go on TikTok to hide propaganda pushed by the Chinese government, and I don't want to go on X to hide Nazi posts from my feed. Nothing against Elon here. I think there are bots or fake.
Well, Mikhaila Peterson seems to be implying that the reason that she's seeing these posts is just it's bots, it's fake account, it's funding from Iran. The reason that these posts are getting suggested is because they have a metric ton of likes, they have a metric ton of retweets. Because they have a metric ton of likes and a metric ton of retweets, they have a metric ton of views. You guys, we've seen this in terms of just the tweets that Mikhaila Peterson got ratioed for. Mikhaila Peterson with her 400,000 followers, even when she's getting elevated by Daddy and his 5 million followers, Mikhaila Peterson's tweets are getting 1 million views and like a couple thousand likes, whereas Nick Fuentes' tweets are getting maybe tens of thousands of likes, but also, like 100,000 views, but then like tens of thousands of likes, or like 200,000 views, but like a lot of likes. So the ratio is that the algorithm is assuming that because Nick Fuentes' tweets and Dr. Lupus's tweets and Jake Shields' tweets and all of these other people, they're getting a lot of likes, they're getting a lot of retweets, they're getting all this stuff, they're getting all the attention, and Mikhaila Peterson's tweets are not getting that attention. That is why they're being pushed by the algorithm. And I've seen this directly, guys. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, it is just a fact that if you tweet about these topics and you are on a certain side, you will get likes, views, retweets. My Twitter numbers right now are off the charts just because I've been like adjacent to this whole affair. And listen, I don't think that that's necessarily a reason to always lean into that. I'm tweeting about it now because it's something I'm thinking about. It's something I'm interested in. I'm not doing it artificially for any reason, but like, that's just a fact. that this stuff will get more views than the socialism stuff or all the clips I have or any of this stuff, because that's what people are interested in right now. And so Mikhaila Peterson saying that, here's my point. Mikhaila Peterson saying these views would never be accepted in the real world. The fact of the matter is there are a lot of people who like these views. And I really don't think that these views are as fringe as people think they are anymore. I don't think it's a fringe view to say that we should put the interests of America over the interests of Israel. I think that that's actually a pretty well accepted view by Americans, to say the interests of America should come ahead of the interests of Israel. I don't think it's as fringe a view as Mikhaila Peterson might think to say, did we actually learn about the truth about the Holocaust in schools? And I say that because I've got a poll running on Twitter right now where I asked people, do you think you learned about the truth in, do you think you learned the truth about the Holocaust in schools? Yes or no? I have this poll running on Twitter right now. Something like 85% of the people who've answered that poll say that they do not believe that they learned the truth about the Holocaust in schools. That's not a fringe belief. There's this guy, Evan, who's on Twitter. He's been tweeting a lot about this. I really hope he doesn't get banned. He did a poll the other day in which he asked, how many people do you think died in the Holocaust? And the options were 300,000, 1 to 2 million, 2 to 5 million, or 6 million or more. I answered that poll when it had 40,000 answers, so a significant amount of answers. And when I answered that poll, something like 57% of people answered that they thought less than 300,000 people died in the Holocaust. And the second most answer was 6 million, and I think that had what was it, like 30% or something? So those were the top two answers. But you know, something funny happened is the poll actually ended up around 70,000 answers. And at some point, there was a mad rush of people who thought 6 million people died in the Holocaust. I wish I had taken a screenshot of it, because when I saw it around 43,000 answers, it was absolutely that the number one answer by a significant degree was like 57% of people thought that 300,000 people or less and died in the Holocaust. And YouTube, I'm not denying the Holocaust here. I am merely reporting on the results of a poll. I am not stating an opinion. I didn't tell you which I voted for. I'm merely stating the results of the poll. And the point that I'm making is that I think that these are not actually fringe views anymore. Because how is it possible to have a poll of 70,000 answers? And even if you net out at like 50% of people think that 300,000 people or less died in the Holocaust, and 50% of people think that 6 million people died in the Holocaust, that's still 35,000 people for each answer, roughly. So maybe it's not indicative of reality. We don't know the demographic makeup of the people answering those polls. We don't know if those are all real accounts. Okay, fine. We can poke holes and with the polling methodology. But I think Mikhaila Peterson might be a little unhinged from where people are. And I think that perhaps October 7th and the ensuing several months of the ensuing several months of America cucking to Israel at every goddamn step has made people start asking questions. And quite frankly, I think those questions are worthy of being asked when they're not asked in a hateful manner, when they're not asked in a derogatory manner, when they're not asked in a manner where we're saying, I don't want to genocide anyone. I don't want to genocide any population. I don't want to genocide the Jews. I don't want to genocide the Palestinians. I don't know why this is so controversial. I think I have the very deeply controversial opinion that genocide is bad. That genocide is always bad. There is never a time when genocide is correct. But I kind of think that I should have the ability to ask questions about a historical event at the same time. And you know what? You know what? Something funny happened. Because here's the thing. I never even wanted to reverse engineer this. Never wanted to do it. Never, ever, 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 ever wanted to reverse engineer this. I never questioned what happened in the Holocaust at all. Yo, listen, I went to a school at which Elie Wiesel was a professor at my school. Elie Wiesel taught classes at Boston University while I was there. I never questioned this. I consumed all the books. I watched Schindler's List a whole bunch of times. Never questioned any of this. Until people started telling me that I couldn't ask questions because I'm a little bit of a rebellious bitch. And if you tell me that I shouldn't do something, then I'm probably going to do that thing. And quite frankly, I don't really understand why I shouldn't, because a lot more people died in Mao's China than died in the Holocaust. I mean, to the tune of like tens of millions more people died in Mao's China during the Cultural Revolution. A lot of people starved. A lot more people died then than died in the Holocaust. So why can't I ask questions about the Holocaust? I can ask questions about the Cultural Revolution. Why can't I ask questions about this? And I got to say, I tweeted out earlier, and let's actually just do a refresh on this tweet because I bet the numbers have gone up even since I loaded this. I tweeted out last night around 12:30 in the morning. You didn't see that. That video doesn't exist. That's all a lie. Okay, if you saw that, link it. Receipts, please. Where'd you see that video? Link it. I don't believe you if I don't see the video myself. Because here's what happened, guys, is you have so many people, and we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about how Israel probably murdered a whole bunch of its own civilians. We're going to get to this. But I no longer trust anyone I see saying stuff like this. Do you remember? Does everyone remember when Hamas beheaded 40 babies? Does everyone remember this? They beheaded 40 babies and then they burned those bodies alive, and then there was never any evidence of it. There was never any evidence of it. And that story about Hamas beheading 40 babies got debunked pretty much immediately because there was never any evidence of it. So if you have some receipts, bring the receipts. But back to this. Last night around 1 a.m., I tweeted out, I was never interested in questioning anything about the Holocaust until people told me I couldn't. Now, this tweet doesn't say that I've actually done anything to research into the Holocaust, because I really haven't. I mean, I watched that Europa movie several months ago. I watched, I think 7 of the 10 parts of it. I didn't watch the whole thing because it's a long-ass thing, and maybe I do want to revisit it at some point. But, that's pretty much the extent of what I've done. I haven't actually reverse engineered that much of the Holocaust. And I'm not saying, I didn't even say that I doubted the Holocaust. I didn't question the 6 million. I didn't do any of that. All I said was, I was never actually interested in looking into this until people told me I shouldn't. And when I said this on Twitter, two things happened. The first thing that happened was I got 165,000 views on it in less than 24 hours, with almost 700 retweets, 5,000 likes, 160 people have bookmarked it, metric ton of comments. And what that tells me is a lot of people agree with me. Now let's look in the let's look in the quote tweets on this. There are some people that don't agree with me. There are people calling me mentally ill, whatever. But there are also people, I think it's in the quote tweets, maybe it's just in the replies, who are basically saying, yup, this is me too. This is me. This precisely, 100%. We've got a Holocaust look at this guy. This guy's a Holocaust professor, and this guy's like, this idiot was a presenter on PragerU. Hey man, maybe if PragerU hadn't canceled me over a tweet 3 years ago, and then maybe, probably, allegedly planted a hit piece on me in Newsweek, maybe if PragerU had never done that, maybe I wouldn't even be on this train of thought right now. You ever think of that? This is true for me as well. Same goes for the vaccines. And if you look in the replies, it's kind of like the same thing. It's a lot of people. Well, some people are giving helpful information, but a lot of people in there, and we're not going to scroll through all the replies, but a lot of people in the replies are basically being like, yep, me too. Yep, never cared about this. Never really thought about it. Never crossed my mind until people didn't want me talking about it. The other responses that I've received to this are people calling me names, demeaning me, insulting me, calling me all manner of thing, calling me Jew hater, anti-Semite, all the different insults that people love to throw around on the internet, whatever. All because I said, maybe I might look into this. Now, I actually haven't done anything. I have literally done nothing. And just even the idea that maybe someone on the internet might look into the Holocaust and be like, what happened? What are the other perspectives on this? That's enough to get called a Jew hater. I haven't even done any research, and I'm already like, I am anti-Semitic without even coming to a conclusion. That's interesting, isn't it? Isn't it interesting that the only thing that you need to do is ask a question? And even if you don't know the answer to the question that you're asking, you're already anti-Semitic? Anyway, I guess we'll see where that goes. But let's go back to Mikhaila's video here. I have to set up the sound. Apologies. Let's see what else. But my point is that maybe, just maybe, it's Mikhaila Peterson who might be a little unhinged from what is going on.
Accounts behind a lot of this, and possibly funding from Iran. And I know he's trying to get that under control. Next in these series of events, the scum of the internet pulled the classic high school girl trick of trying to tarnish someone's reputation by promulgating rumors, and pulled out a picture of Andrew Tate and I claiming that I slept with Andrew, which both of us have said multiple times isn't true and has nothing to do with anything I had said. Truly lovely things this week.
So Mikhaila Peterson's claim, and this is gossip, and it's a little, it's not normally something I would talk about on this channel. It's gossip, and I don't like it, but Mikhaila Peterson's claim is that Andrew Tate flew Mikhaila Peterson out to Romania for one night for business. Does anyone actually believe that? Like, I mean, like, if you're going to go all the way out to Romania for business, you at least stay a day or two. You actually do a whole thing around it. You don't just go out for like one night for business. But people can draw their own conclusions, I suppose.
Weekend. Then yesterday, Candace Owens makes a video on my dad and my response on X.
So I'll ask the question that's on everybody's mind this week. What exactly is going on with Dr. Jordan Peterson?
She starts off with compliments and then attempts to try to tear him to shreds. She goes into how he's lost his audience and men don't trust him anymore.
He lost a huge following, and they felt that this response was not calm. It was not dictated by rationality or the logos, which Jordan Peterson loves to speak about.
None of this is remotely true. He just hit 8 million on YouTube. And then she goes on and blames it on drug addiction and his give 'em hell tweet last year. Again, employing the tactic high school.
I mean, I don't actually think it's an argument that Jordan Peterson hit like 8 million on YouTube, because a lot of those people have been subscribed for a really long time. And I'm going to be honest. Okay, so if you have 8 million on YouTube, I went on Jordan Peterson's YouTube page, and Jordan Peterson gets like a good number of views on some of his videos. He gets like 30,000 views, 50,000 views, all this stuff. But like, I kind of think about the views that I get on some of my videos in terms of like, I don't get like a terrible number of views on YouTube. I'm shadow banned to high heaven and like all this stuff. But like, I have 100,000 subscribers. Most of my subscribers came in like 2020. I know that like, I don't actually get a lot of views from the subscriptions feed. I get views when my videos are recommended. But I guess I'm saying that like Jordan Peterson has 80 times the subscribers I have. Is that right? He has 80 times, 80. He has 8 million subscribers. Jordan Peterson is not getting the amount of views on his videos that is commensurate with having 8 million subscribers, is my point. Maybe some risky business. Exactly, Jan. Thank you. But whatever, Jordan Peterson does just fine. He works for the Daily Wire. He gets that sweet Zionist money. So, you know, he's probably doing just fine.
Girls use to tarnish someone's reputation that they don't like. Classic. So she starts off with, he's always been really nice to me.
I obviously have met and worked with him. He has always been extremely kind to me. So nothing that I'm going to say should be taken personally.
And segues nicely into laughing at an anaphylactic reaction to sodium metabisulfite.
Here is what he said. He said that it was due to the fact that he had consumed some apple cider. Take a listen.
But I didn't want to not do it.
Apple cider. Like, what was it doing?
Sulfites in it.
What was it doing to you?
Oh, it produced an overwhelming sense of impending doom. And I seriously mean overwhelming. Like, there's no way I could have lived like that if that would have lasted.
Oh, wait, look, guys, look, our friend that claimed that that she saw videos of the beheaded babies. It's absurd to insult you. You're allowed to find the facts. You should look into it. I did years ago. Okay, well, I mean, I appreciate you saying that it's absurd to insult me, but like, where's the video? Like, I mean, I want that video. Tell us where to find the video. But I appreciate you saying it's absurd to insult me. I agree with that. I agree. Anyway, so from this point in the video, Mikhaila Peterson veers into a big, complex medical explanation for why her father's insane. I don't really think we need to watch it. So that was what she said in that video about the Twitter scandal. That was basically all she said. But I told you guys, I told you to keep in mind. Hang on. I told you to keep in mind that we heard Mikhaila Peterson say twice that it's okay to call an individual a rat. It is not okay to call a group of people a rat. So everyone's on board with that, right? The standard of behavior that we are holding ourselves to is that it is acceptable to call an individual a rat. It is unacceptable to call a group of people a rat. Well, Jordan Peterson tweeted again today. All right. I'm going to ask everyone in the chat to focus on what I'm saying and to stop arguing about the video that we all know doesn't exist. Can we refocus? Okay, we're looking at this. Let me just do a quick check over on Rumble. Hi, Rumble, I see you too. Okay, so we all know that it's okay to call an individual a rat. It is not okay to call a group of people a rat. And yes, Optical Hitler, you were the first to point this out. I want to give, we give credit where credit is due on this channel. Jordan Peterson tweeted today, another sonnet. Hey, new neo-Nazi troll rats. Well, I had neo in there. Hey, new Nazi troll rats. Doesn't it seem like in the very first sentence of this sonnet that Jordan Peterson is referring to a group of people as rats? Am I on glue? Didn't we just go through a whole to-do where Mikhaila Peterson is making this big deal on Twitter about how you can't refer to a group of people as rats, and if you do refer to a group of people as rats, then you should be censored on Twitter? And then Jordan Peterson swoops in and writes a whole fucking poem in which the first line of the poem is literally referring to a group of people that he doesn't like as rats. This is the greatest psychologist that has ever lived. This is the savior of young men. This is the champion of free speech, who would never censor anyone that he disagrees with, referring to an entire group of people as rats. Hey, new Nazi troll rats. Anonymously trumpeting your anti-Semitism doesn't rescue you from your mother's basement, or from the demon of resentment, or make you more attractive to women who take one look at you and shudder, and rightly bloody so. Listen. I spent an entire night with the Groypers but 1 month ago at AFPAC. And everyone told me that I was going to be walking into like this room full of short, fat losers with tiny dicks who don't know how to talk to girls, and it was going to be really embarrassing. I heard this from everyone. And instead, I walked into a room of, well, handsome and well-dressed young men who were really funny and fun to hang out with, and I had a great time, and they treated me really well, and they were really handsome. They were. I'm sorry. There were a lot of handsome Groypers. And so this idea that women just take one look at the Groypers and they run away screaming. No, it's not true. Like, it's the Groypers might want people to think that for some reason, but it is not actually true. You are despicable bottom rung cowards, using Gaza, Hamas as camouflage for your detestable cluster B, psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and of course, sadism. So now Jordan Peterson has diagnosed an entire group of people with cluster B personality disorder, which includes psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and sadism. Does that seem responsible for a world-renowned psychologist? To publicly diagnose a group of people with a collective personality disorder? I don't know. I kind of am a psychologist, and even though I'm not a clinician, I don't actually think that's the most responsible thing he could have done in the world. Maybe the all-meat diet is wearing off. Maybe he needs to go back on the benzos. I don't know, but like, I don't think that's responsible. I've got your number, you pathetic tantrum toddlers. You don't even have the courage of genuine bullies. You Cheeto dust covered, sweat stained, white t-shirt hide behind your mom's skirts scum. Disgust is wasted on you. Jordan Peterson having some feelings. There. And he continued to attack Andrew Torba. Oh, Andrew Tate's on this? Oh, I didn't see this. There's Nick. Love watching the meltdown. He continued attacking Andrew Torba. Andrew Torba had tweeted earlier, the funny part about this overwhelming vast majority of us are married men who have multiple children. That's actually, well, I wouldn't say the vast majority, but like a lot of the Groypers are married with children. Yeah, that's true. We care deeply about their future and have no problem naming the people who are destroying it. They call us every name in the book, but they don't never call us liars. And then Jordan Peterson quote tweets that, and he says, "There are no bigger liars than those who believe their own lies. I don't think you do believe your own lies, base Torba. Even though you are obviously a liar and a despicable liar, I think instead you are voluntarily irredeemable in your smug, self-satisfied malevolence." And you know what the best part about all this is? Actually, let me scroll. Let me see if I can find Keith Woods on this. There's Jake. Let's see. Yeah, here's someone posting a tweet from Jordan Peterson in 2016. You start your argument with slander. Yeah. Where's Keith Woods? Keith Woods had an excellent reply. And I have to say, like, I used to not like Keith Woods because Keith Woods was connected to the no white guilt asshole. And I have a massive disdain for that no white guilt asshole for many, many reasons I'm not going to go into. I knew Keith Woods was connected to him in some way. And so I didn't like Keith Woods by proxy. But I have to say, I've started coming around on Keith Woods. I especially started coming around when Nick Fuentes said the other day that Keith Woods has like tempered his sensibilities in some ways, in positive ways, in good ways, where Nick is coming across a little bit more polished. He's being a little bit more thoughtful. He's more self-aware about maybe some of the times when he went a little too far. And it seems as though his friendship with Keith Woods has actually kind of like helped him evolve as a person. And so, you know what? I'm kind of coming around on the whole Keith Woods thing now. And I have to say, his response to Jordan Peterson was really great. He said, "Dr. Peterson, Nick Fuentes' response to you received 29,000 likes. It's just not plausible to dismiss all these people as narcissistic psychopaths. You advised your daughter against advocating censorship as you believe it's better to confront these ideas. Why not debate Fuentes?" And isn't that the point of all this? That I think we can all see. I think it's pretty clear to anyone paying attention that the reason that Jordan Peterson will not debate Nick Fuentes is Jordan Peterson has become massively, 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 massively unhinged. The all-meat diet is not working. And if Jordan Peterson got anywhere near Nick Fuentes would kick his ass figuratively, like rhetorically, not literally. Nick Fuentes would kick his ass in a debate. And I think it'd be incredibly embarrassing for Jordan Peterson. And I think we all know what the deal is. And I think it's really sad. And I don't ever think it's a good thing to watch someone come unglued on the internet. But maybe Jordan and Mikhaila Peterson need to go back and have a meeting or something and really kind of assess how they found themselves in the predicament that they're currently in. And maybe do a little self-reflection and maybe consider if they need to take a step back and think a little bit more carefully about writing full sonnets on Twitter where you're calling groups of people rats while at the same time advocating for censorship for anyone that calls groups of people rats. I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. And one of the things I've especially enjoyed is watching kind of like the wannabe influencers, the clout chasers that are just like, they're running around trying to justify what Jordan Peterson is doing. It's so hilarious. I'm not talking about the big time influencers. I'm not talking about the ones who everyone knows their name. I'm talking about people like this. I'm talking about people like Carrie Smith. Now, people on my channel know exactly who Carrie Smith is because Carrie Smith has been an absolute psycho to me for like years now. She's absolutely obsessed with me. Carrie Smith thinks that I'm her abusive mother. For real. Carrie Smith once wrote an entire essay about how I'm her abusive mother. But Carrie Smith is an epic clout chaser on Twitter. And so anytime stuff like this happens, Carrie Smith is sure to be there and be like, no, this is really normal. I swear, guys, I swear. Jordan Peterson is really the sane one in this situation. It's the evil groypers who are causing all the problems. So I had to go check Carrie's Twitter today because I had to see. Oh, isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? Thank you. So I had to go see. Here's what Carrie had to say. And maybe Carrie will bless us with another anti-groyper video, which I always enjoy those. Last time Carrie did an anti-groyper video, she wore a cowboy hat, and then Wurzelroot reacted to it over on Cozy, and he put on a cowboy hat too. Let's see what Carrie had to say. Groypers and other anti-Semites and white nationalists are just as morally reprehensible as the woke. They're racist, just like the woke. They're collectivists, just like the woke. They are identitarians, just like the woke. They are fueled by resentment, just like the woke. They don't currently hold any power or social currency, though, unlike the woke, who have amassed power in politics, education, academia, the media, corporations, and even in the church to some degree. The groyper rats. Oh, wow. Carrie, the good Christian. Remember, guys, Carrie is a good Christian, and she's part of a Christian cult. And I'm not just saying that. I am not, to be very clear, I'm not saying that all Christians are in a cult. I am saying that Carrie specifically belongs to a very specific cult. She does. Her pastor acts like a cult leader. They're like, the pastor keeps them under control as a congregation. You can get excommunicated from the congregation if you do certain things. So I'm not saying Christians in general are in a cult. I'm saying Carrie is in a cult. But I do think it's funny that she pretends to be the good, morally righteous Christian. And again, she's doing exactly what Mikhaila Peterson said she shouldn't do and referring to an entire group of people as rats. So by Mikhaila Peterson standards, Carrie's post should be censored. I think that's a great idea. No, not really. I don't believe in censorship. But if I was following Mikhaila Peterson's rules, I would. The groyper rats are still relegated to a lunatic fringe where the woke should and hopefully will be soon. What you are seeing is the righteous social shaming that happens in the public square. I'll put the link in the chat, Milk Tea Groyper. There's the link. What you are seeing is the righteous social shaming that happens in the public square. This is what we argue for when we argue for free speech, so that bad ideas must be disinfected with sunlight. Social stigma is an important part of keeping evil people and evil ideology on the fringes of society. We just spent a whole month righteously shaming the evils of woke pride. This is the same thing. Social shaming, racism, whether it's woke racism or groyper racism, is what prevents authoritarianism from rushing in to regulate society. And then she goes on to say, here is a sermon from my pastor, Bradley, about the virtues of moral shaming. Carrie's cult leader pastor is actually preaching that we should be morally shaming and shunning people for ideas we don't like. Isn't that funny? But one of the points I want to make, though, is, listen, Carrie wants to talk about morally shaming people and who's on the lunatic fringe. Carrie has like 12,000 views on this post. On my post that I did last night about learning more about the Holocaust, I have 165,000 views. And I'm getting a lot of positive feedback on that post. I'm not just getting called names and stuff. I'm actually getting a lot of positive feedback on it. So which is really the fringe position? Is it the 12,000 views that said we should be righteously shaming people that say words we disagree with? Or is it the one where I'm asking a question about the Holocaust and I get 165,000 views, which is actually the fringe position. Because I kind of think it's a very fringe position to justify the world-renowned psychologist who is writing haikus on Twitter about how much he hates people he disagrees with. Just saying. So I guess we'll continue to watch the epic Jordan Peterson meltdown. I think it's a really sad thing, again, but I also think that it is very important to call out this bullshit when we see it and to really show people that the people that are lifted up by the conservative establishment are insane. And they're not people you should be taking direction from, and they're not people you should be listening to. You go, like, people need to do their own research. People need to go, like I said, go listen to Nick Fuentes for yourself if you think he's such a psychopathic rat. Oh, wait, you don't have to, because we're going to listen to Nick right now. Does anyone want to listen to Nick Fuentes? Does anyone want to listen to some stuff that Nick Fuentes said last night? Because listen, man, again, like, I kind of made my name by being the girl that I'm like, instead of relying on what other people are saying about these people, instead of, trusting the media or trusting the influencers, I'm just going to go see directly for myself. And so why don't we listen to Nick? And in order to preface this, and the reason I want to do this, Nick's show last night blew my mind. Listen, I'm pretty tuned in on a lot of things. I'm pretty tuned in on what the far left is doing. I'm pretty tuned into like who the activists are, who the organizations are. I focus most of my energy on that. And so I had no idea about this particular thing. I know people who are following the Middle East stuff more closely knew about this. I know people who are hinged more into the dissident right knew about this, but I didn't know this. I had kind of heard some people say, well, again, not everyone knows this. You might know this. Not everyone does, because some people focus on different things. And sometimes when people focus on different things, it's important to share information with them so that they can look at this information and maybe see the world a little bit differently, okay? So I think many of us kind of suspected after October 7th that maybe all of the nonsense, well, I shouldn't say nonsense, maybe all of the uproar over this is the worst event ever since the history of the Holocaust. More Jews died than that on this day than in the history since the Holocaust. And I think that in the back of my head, I kind of suspected this had happened, but I didn't have any proof of it, and I wasn't really going to look into it because I was looking at other things. I think some of us may have suspected that maybe October 7th didn't go exactly the way that Israel was saying. Well, last night on his show, and we're going to watch Nick talk about this, but I want to preface this. Last night on his show, Nick talked about this report from antiwar.com. Now, Nick did not make this up. Antiwar.com is a libertarian website. It's run by Scott Horton. Scott Horton's a libertarian. He's more of a lefty libertarian, but he's a very smart libertarian. He's one of the smartest people that writes about this stuff. This is from someone who worked for him called Dave DeCamp, but Scott Horton absolutely saw this before it went up. So I trust antiwar.com as a source, okay? So Nick was responding to this report on antiwar.com. Report confirms Israel ordered Hannibal directive during October 7th response. A report published by an Israeli newspaper, so this is coming out of an Israeli newspaper, on Sunday confirmed that the Israeli military implemented a secretive procedure known as the Hannibal directive during the response to the October 7th Hamas attack on southern Israel. The directive allows for Israeli forces to prevent Israelis from being taken hostage, even if that means putting their lives in danger. The directive had historically applied only to soldiers, but it was also used on Israeli civilians during the October 7th response. What this said is that it is Israeli policy. If they think people are going to be taken hostage, to kill their own people in order to prevent them from being taken hostage. And usually the Hannibal directive only applies to soldiers, which you can kind of maybe understand that, because soldiers might, if they're taken hostage, give up critical information about infrastructure or anything like that. So maybe you can wrap your head around that. But on October 7th, the Hannibal directive was also used on Israeli civilians. I want to scroll down a little bit in this article. In one incident at Kibbutz Be'er, I don't know how to pronounce that, Israeli tanks shell the house that contained Hamas militants and Israeli hostages, killing 13 Israeli civilians, including 12-year-old twin sisters. The officer who ordered the shelling, Brigadier General Barak Hiram, acknowledged to the New York Times that he ordered the attack even at the cost of civilian casualties. How many of its own people did Israel kill on October 7th? Because they didn't want them being taken hostage? All this uproar that we've seen from all these people, from Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire to the guy who runs the Babylon Bee, to all these people who, the 1200, the 1200, the 1200, the 1200, worst tragedy since the Holocaust. How many of these people were actually killed by Hamas? And how many of these people were killed by Israel because Israel didn't want their citizens. Israel preferred to kill their own citizens rather than those citizens being taken hostage. Now let's watch Nick cover this, because I know a lot of you don't watch Nick. And I believe in going and showing people information they don't normally watch. And I have to say, I really liked Nick's tie selection last night. I'm a big fan of gold. I think gold is a good color. And it also doesn't the tie, and I know this is a serious topic, but Nick's tie selection is also a serious topic, okay? I'm taking my influence over Nick's tie selection, such as it is, if it even exists at all, very seriously. And I just want to say, even though this is a serious topic, I also want Nick to wear nice ties. And he picked a very nice tie last night, and I thought it looked great on him. And I thought it looked great with the set, and it really complemented the browns and the greens and all that stuff. So we have 2 good tie days in a row now for Nick. And I'm really hoping tonight is going to be the 3rd good tie day in a row. So, yep, hair looks good. Suit, even the color of his suit, I really like the color of that suit too. Nick is like, he's doing good. He's doing good. Our boy is doing good. All right, but more importantly, let's listen to Nick discuss this topic and we can talk about it.
But I want to do it tonight. So our first story, we're going to cover this brand new report out of Israel. And I've been trying to cover this for the past, well, really since like Friday, but just haven't had the time. And it's this brand new report. Like I said, it's part of a series of revelations that have come out since the October 7th attack that change our understanding of what transpired that day. October 7th, 2023 is when Hamas launched their surprise attack of Israel by breaching the border in dozens of different places, killing civilians, kidnapping civilians, and bringing them back into the Gaza Strip to hold them hostage. And it was a day that changed the world. It does not just concern Gaza. It literally concerns the entire world. It's had ripple effects everywhere. There have been 7 theaters of conflict that are not just Gaza, but also the West Bank, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen. And also, what's the 7th one? Lebanon, of course, who could forget? So it's 7 different theaters of conflict, seven different separate battlefields.
So true, MacB.
But it's
so
also
true.
affected
Thank you.
all of the politics around the world. It's affected the election here in the United States and all of the Jewish donors that have pivoted to the right in the aftermath of the attack. It's affected the elections in Europe. Many of the right-wing parties, and we'll talk about this later tonight, but many of the right-wing parties in the European Union elections and in various national elections got a benefit or a boon because they supported Israel. And they received monetary support and political support from the Jewish communities in their respective countries and from the state of Israel because of this dire situation from October 7th. It's affecting the expansion of the Abraham Accords to Saudi Arabia, and then the forthcoming IMEC corridor, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. And so it cannot be overstated. October 7th is an event with world historical importance, truly. It has had, although people think it is confined to Israel and the Gaza Strip, it has had truly global significance, and especially for the Western world. And it will echo throughout this decade, mark my words. But there's just one problem. Like the Holocaust and like 9/11 and like other events like this with this world historical significance, there is a narrative that is being promulgated about what transpired that is not exactly true. The shocking images on October 7th.
Listen, I'm going to say this just because I'm live on YouTube. I don't mean any disrespect. I just want to say that I think that the narrative, because I'm on YouTube, okay, I think that the narrative that we've been told about the Holocaust is completely true and completely accurate, and absolutely exactly 6 million people died, and no one should question it, and anyone questioning it is bad and wrong and horrible, okay?
Caused a visceral reaction in the Jewish community and outside of it throughout the world. And it has, so people say, served as a pretext. It has justified what has come since. Because October 7th was so bad, according to a narrative was constructed about that date and about that event and some of the particular details. And because of that narrative, because of the emotional weight of the narrative, people argue that it justifies Israel's brutal campaign in Gaza, which rages on until today. What many people believe is an effort to ethnically cleanse the territory and potentially expel over 2 million Palestinians. It has justified a new NATO war in Yemen, in the Red Sea, which people don't even talk about. It has justified renewed American involvement in Iraq and Syria against Iran's proxies. It is justifying potentially yet another forthcoming war in Lebanon, justifying strikes against Iran inside and outside the country. It has pushed many Jews in American politics to the right. I think it's a major factor for why Donald Trump might become president. And this is just the beginning. Like I said, the effects will ripple throughout the decade. But the problem with all of this is that the narrative, among other problems, the narrative that has served as the pretext of all of this just isn't true. key details about the October 7th attack are not true. We were lied to about what exactly happened. And what's very interesting is that people such as myself, who are very skeptical, and people such as myself, who are very historically literate about similar events and about the constituent parties involved, had our suspicions. People like myself suspected that what we were being told about October 7th was not true. Skeptical about some of the claims being made. We were called anti-Semitic. And it's not just me. Even allies of the state of Israel, even vocal, ardent supporters of the state of Israel were called anti-Semitic for questioning particular facts about the narrative. But as time has gone on, information has been revealed that has justified all of those suspicions. So tonight we're going to talk about one of those facts, one of the claims about October 7th, which is the death toll. They said about October 7th that 1,200 people were killed. They said it was the most heinous attack on the Jewish community since the Holocaust 80 years ago. And that's a pretty big claim. That would be pretty significant if it were true. And they said that Hamas leaped over the border, they killed 1,200 civilians, and it is the scope and the brutality of the attack that has justified everything that's come since. And one particular fact, one particular suspicion about that number that I had and other people had is that perhaps Hamas was not responsible for the death of 1,200 people. Probably it was far fewer. And maybe Hamas wasn't even responsible for all of the death. Maybe Israel was responsible for not just some of the death, but a considerable amount of the civilian dead on October 7th. And for a long time, I said that the evidence for this is, of course, common sense. Look at what Hamas was armed with. How did they conduct the attack? They did it on motorcycles, hang gliders, and the weapons they used were assault rifles, light arms, primitive munitions. There are only about 20,000 Hamas fighters. Far fewer participated in the raid. To kill 1,200 people would be extraordinary. What's more, if you look at the damage, we can see from video and photographic evidence that there were dozens and dozens of scorched buildings and vehicles. And I said this from the start, AK-47s and assault rifles do not destroy cars and buildings.
Mm-hmm.
They kill people. They do not destroy.
I remember tweeting about that at the time too, where there was this whole like image of all these cars parked in that, I think it was like a field for that concert. And all of these cars looked like they had been burned. And we were like, how the fuck did they do that? What exactly? The cars. Like, how did that happen? What weapon did they sneak in on the hang gliders to firebomb these cars? Well,
destroy cars and buildings such that there is incendiary fire damage. They don't burn a car down to its metal frame. Explosives do that. Missiles do that. That looks more like it's consistent with an attack from a helicopter, an attack helicopter, than from a primitive Hamas squadron, than from the light arms that they brought with them on the raid. And so now we have a new report. This is according to the IDF, coming from the Israeli press, that Israel did in fact kill their own people. They implemented what they call the Hannibal doctrine, which is that they would rather that their soldiers and their people die and be killed than be taken hostage by Israel's enemies. And we'll talk all about this report. First, I want to go down memory lane a little bit and just touch on some of these revelations, because this is only the latest. And we're going to get into all the details. We have this report from antiwar.com, which is one of my favorite sources. I'm not sponsored by them, but I think people should read antiwar.com because I think it's one of the better ones. People are always asking me what I read. But we'll get into this report. I first want to say this is not the first revelation of its kind. Of course, the narrative of October 7th is built on the scope and the brutality, the numbers and the qualitative factors, the qualitative characteristics of how the violence was carried out. And the first lie that we were told about October 7th is that there were 40 beheaded babies. You remember this?
Yeah.
They said there were 40 beheaded babies, which, if that were true, would be horrific. If that were true, it would demand a response. If that were true, it would demand international condemnation. But it was a lie. Almost as quickly as the 40 beheaded babies narrative cropped up shortly after October 7th, it was debunked. By December of 2023, it was fully debunked. And even earlier, there was evidence which pointed to exactly how this lie was concocted. There were some journalists on the ground reporting that some people had been beheaded, and by beheaded, they meant their heads were detached from their bodies because of explosions. Not that they were decapitated like intentionally with a knife, but that people were blown up, which is still horrible, but it's not quite the same thing. And then there was a separate unrelated report about a family that had died with 1 or 2 minors in a home. And we saw that within days, these two separate narratives and other similar narratives like it came together, and a narrative about 40 babies being intentionally decapitated was concocted. And we found out that was a lie. There was a narrative about a mass rape that occurred, that Hamas not only...
Hey guys, by the way, if you're appreciating that I'm showing you this, when I think most people on YouTube don't actually play this like I do because, you know, whatever, but please mount the like button for me. Let YouTube know to recommend this stream so more people can come and join us and get introduced to content that they usually won't see. Would appreciate it. Thank you.
Only kidnap people for the purpose of using them as hostages, as bargaining chips, but that there was a mass rape and massive sexual violence. We also found out that that was not true, because when asked to deliver the evidence, the Israelis had none. There was no massive rape. There was no systematic raping going on of hundreds of people. It didn't happen. And then, maybe most damning of all, there was a story about the fact that the Israelis had prior knowledge of the attack, which, again, immediately after October 7th, we had reports of. And even more recently, we had confirmation from the IDF that, yes, in fact, Israel knew about these attacks up to 1 year in advance. They knew exactly what Hamas was planning. They knew when they were planning it. They saw Hamas preparing to perform the operation that they eventually executed on October 7th. They knew all the information well in advance. They received intelligence. Several IDF officers attempted to run it up the flagpole. They were all ignored. And so these are just a few of the different aspects of the October 7th narrative. Again, it's the emotional weight of the narrative.
Yeah.
It's concerning.
This is a really good point from Mimi in the chat. Israel can say whatever they want. They can push out whatever story they want. And if you ask them for evidence, then you are the anti-Semite for asking for evidence. It's like, what the hell, man? They can say whatever they want because you get called an anti-Semite if you ask for evidence. Exactly. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. And anyone with a good memory would remember that the terror events are instantly claimed by the perpetrators. I still remember the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, the ones who allegedly unalived babies didn't. Yep. Thank you, Rottweiler. Do appreciate it.
Key facts, key quantitative and qualitative facts about the narrative, which has justified everything, of which there is so much, which we have covered on the show. It has truly moved the entire Western world politically. And it's not just about the Gaza offensive. It is about so much more, as we've covered since October. And it was all based on a lie. So this is just the latest. And the latest story, like I said, comes to us from antiwar.com. It's a story from Haaretz, and I'll read it to you. This is about the implementation of what they call their Hannibal directive. And the Hannibal directive says that if Israeli soldiers are captured by an enemy force, that the Israeli military must kill their own soldiers. And the reason for this is because they say Israel's such a small and weak state that if an Israeli is captured and compromised, they may give up key intelligence. Or they could be used as a bargaining chip to get land or other concessions. And so this is actually an extremely pragmatic, but also extremely ruthless, and in my opinion, immoral doctrine. It says that they'll kill their own people rather than give up any kind of secrets or give up any kind of concessions in a potential future negotiation. So the Hannibal doctrine says the IDF will kill their own soldiers sooner than they'll allow their soldiers to be taken into custody and taken hostage, and then potentially released down the line in the future, regardless of how confident the Israeli government is that these captured soldiers might be released, that they might live, that they might see their families. It doesn't matter. Israel says kill them. And on October 7th, Israel expanded the Hannibal doctrine to civilians. And so civilians that were being captured, Israel instructed the military to kill the fleeing Hamas captors with the hostages and kill.
I just can't get over how fucked up this is, if I'm honest about it. And it's like, again, it's one of those things where like maybe you kind of have some suspicions, but to have this confirmed flat out, and remember, this is not coming. You can have whatever feelings you want about Nick Fuentes, okay? This is not coming from Nick Fuentes. This is coming from antiwar.com, which got it from an Israeli newspaper. So he's reporting on the story. He's not making up the story. And it is just like, you think you hear, like we hear fucked up shit all the time. I am very used to living in a dystopian hellscape. But last night when I was listening to Nick talk about this, and this is why I wanted to play this, I was just like, my mind was blown at how evil this is. This is evil. Can you imagine if the United States had a policy, not just for the, I mean, it's bad enough for the soldiers to say, if you are a soldier and you're getting taken hostage, the United States would rather kill you than have you be taken hostage and maybe someday be free. That's fucked up enough. But honest to God, can you imagine if the United States had a policy where if Mexico or Canada invaded the United States and tried to take people hostage, it was the policy of the United States to kill its own civilians rather than allow them to be taken hostage? It's so messed up. I can't even wrap my head around how evil this policy is. Andre says, why nothing about Dementia Joe and Dementia Joe voters or the weak Afghanistan retreat? It's as if their government are oblivious to everything. Yep. Appreciate the super chat. Thank you.
Killing the hostages in the process. So this is a story. It says, quote, a report published by the Israeli newspaper Haaretz on Sunday confirmed that the Israeli military implemented a secretive procedure known as the Hannibal directive during the response to the October 7th Hamas attack on southern Israel. The directive allows Israeli forces to prevent Israelis from being taken hostage, even if that means putting their lives in danger. The directive had historically only applied to soldiers, but it was also used on Israeli civilians during the October 7th response, which, by the way, aside from the implications about the October 7th narrative and everything that it has justified, this is an evil doctrine. This is something that would never go in a Christian nation. This would never fly in a Western European nation. It would never be acceptable for soldiers,
okay,
let alone.
You have been complaining in the chat since I started this segment. Why haven't you known about this? This is old. Why haven't you known about this? This is old. Why is this surprising? This is old. This has already been reported on. Your objection has been noted. But what you don't seem to understand is that my normal audience does not actually normally talk about this sort of thing. My normal audience talks about things that you have no fucking idea about. We talk about things on this channel every single day that you have no clue about, you have never seen reported on your media, you've never seen on Twitter. So if I'm trying to bring my audience a piece of information that they may not be aware of because they don't constantly follow Israeli policy as close as some people, I'm going to do that. And if you don't want to sit here and listen to it, you don't have to. But I'm tired of the complaining in the chat about the fact that I'm trying to show my audience something that they normally don't get exposed to.
For civilians. Imagine if U.S. civilians, Americans, were taken hostage and the American military was instructed to kill innocent American civilians being taken hostage. Could you imagine? Imagine if you were on a border town in Texas and you were taken hostage by the cartels and you got shot in the face by an American soldier under a direct order from the U.S. government. Imagine if you were being held hostage by the cartels in Mexico and you got drone striked. They came in a raid and they killed all the captors and you, because the American government would sooner murder you than offer some kind of concession because they don't have confidence in their military prowess or something like that. Such an evil doctrine. And never forget that that is what separates us from these people. They try to say all the time that Israel is the beacon of democracy in the Middle East. That's the language they use.
All right.
They say that
I have asked you nicely to stop whining in my chat, and you keep whining in my chat, and so now you're going to get to put in a timeout. If you continue to be whining in my chat when you come back from your timeout, you are going to be permanently removed from my chat. I have 2 rules in my chat, guys, for people who might be new here. Number 1, don't be a dick. Do not insult me. Do not insult other people in the audience. No shit posting. We keep it nice for everyone. Number 2, no whining. If I ask you to stop doing something, just stop doing it. And if you don't want to stop doing it, you won't be here long.
Israel is an outpost of Western civilization. They say that Israel is part of Europe. It's part of the West. They say that the United States and the West is anchored to Israel and Jewish civilization. But never forget, we are not the same. We are not the same as these people. Europeans, Christians, we are not like them. That is barbaric. That is evil. That is Oriental. That is old world. That is ancient and medieval behavior. Europeans do not behave like this. This is Jewish behavior. And we call that Jewish behavior because Jewish people, like everybody else in the Orient, like everybody else that is not a part of Christendom, have no regard for the sanctity of human life.
Okay, I'm going to say, again, I'm on YouTube, and so I'm going to say, I don't think that we should be making broad generalizations about all things applying to all Jewish people. I know why Nick's doing this. I'm just saying, I'm sure that some Jewish people do actually care about the sanctity of human life. And so, yeah, disavow, whatever.
Or the life of the individual. And that's why they'll never be like us. So for all that Jews talk about, they're a part of the West, and that's why we have to support them. They're a part of the West, and that's why we must tolerate them.
But that's actually a really good point that Nick is making, though, because like I said, this policy would never fly in America. And this is like why I'm probably so it's mind-boggling to me. And to be told over and over and over and over and over again, Israel is our closest ally. Israel is our closest ally. Israel is our closest ally. This is why we have to give them $3 billion every single year just because Israel is our closest ally. And then if Israel decides that it wants to genocide the Palestinians, then we have to give them more money and we have to pay for that. But Israel is our closest ally. Israel is our closest ally. I'm like, I don't want I don't want to be allies with a country that literally has a policy that it's going to murder its own civilians rather than have them be taken hostage. Like, I don't want to be their ally. I decline. It's barbaric.
Tolerate all the power and privilege they've accumulated in our countries. Never forget, they do not share our values. And this is something that, by the way, they freely admit. After October 7th, it was not a few Western Zionist Jews that came out and said that the United States would not fully back Israel because Westerners are naive. I remember Jews like Ben Shapiro and Gad Saad from Canada and a few others. They said the United States has no stomach for what Israel must do in Gaza because Westerners are naive. They said that Israel has to go and kill all the families and kill all the kids and murder everybody because that's the way the world works. And the West is too naive. They're too wimpy to understand that that's what we have to do. And I find that very curious that there's this double talk. During peacetime, Israel's part of the West. That's why we have to give them all our money. Israel's part of the West. That's why we have to extend our security umbrella over them. That's why we have to support them even when it goes against our direct interests. That's why they have to compete in Eurovision. And that's why we're going to defend them in the United Nations. And that's why we tolerate them running our nationalist movements or our conservative movements, because they're part of the West. That's why we let them run conservative media. So the argument goes. But they don't play by Western rules. They don't behave like Christians. They don't behave like Westerners. And when they flout the Western rules, they say, well, you guys are pussies. Well, Westerners are naive. Really? So it sounds like you guys are really no different than the Muslims. I mean, let's see. You both have these legalistic ancient codes about trying to trick God, about bathing yourself and dietary restrictions. You both have these religious doctrines about killing unbelievers, Muslims about subjecting non-Muslims to jizya status, second-class status, Jews as well in their Talmud. So they're both these legalistic religions with this ethnic favoritism for ethnic Jews or ethnic Arabs. They're both obsessed with holy sites in the Arabian Peninsula or in Israel. Both have no regard for human life outside the religion. Both have a doctrine of ceaseless religious war, exterminationist war against their enemies. In Islam, it's the house of war and the house of Islam. With Jewry, they have all these practices about they have to kill unbelievers. They have to lie to the Gentiles. You can deceive Gentiles. You cannot give a Gentile a gift unless it ingratiates yourself with the Gentiles. So they're always telling us it's the Jews and the Christians versus the Muslims. It's the Jews and the Christians that form the basis of the West. It's Athens and Jerusalem. But they're actually quite like the Muslims in all the worst ways, all the aforementioned ways. And when we remind them of that, they say, well, you're just soft. Really? When they go and kill their own people, they say, well, you're just soft. I don't think so. I think we're actually just decent because we believe in the real God. But anyway, so it's a horrible doctrine. But the article goes on. I digress. It says, quote, a very senior source in the IDF confirmed to Haaretz that the Hannibal directive was ordered on October 7th. The report also cited documents and testimonies from soldiers and officers and found that the order was given multiple times throughout the day. Multiple times throughout October 7th, they said, kill your own people.
This wasn't just used one time. I know I'm repeating exactly what Nick just said, but it's because I'm like I'm so flabbergasted at how bad this is. It's not like there was just one kind of like isolated incident where maybe things got a little out of control and maybe someone gave a bad order. Like, I think, like, even though like I think this whole doctrine is just evil on the face of it, if it was just like one incident, you could kind of maybe say, okay, like if I'm trying to be extremely generous with my interpretation, bad things happen in war and maybe perfect decisions are not always made. But it wasn't just one time. It was multiple times throughout the day on October 7th that Israel gave the order to kill its own people.
One of the orders came at 11:22 a.m., hours into the Hamas attack, which said,
and this is not even in dispute. This information is coming from Israel. This is not some cockamamie conspiracy theory. No one is questioning this. This 100% happened based on Israel's information.
quote, not a single vehicle can return to Gaza. The report said at this point in the attack that the IDF was not aware of the extent of the kidnapping, but it did know that many people were involved. Thus, it was entirely clear what that message meant and what the fate of the kidnapped people would be. So the IDF knew that Hamas was kidnapping people, and they said anyway, not a single vehicle can return to Gaza, meaning the attack helicopters and other missile systems must be mobilized to destroy vehicles, which they knew contained kidnapped Israeli civilians. Kill them all. That's what the IDF said. Not a single vehicle can return. That means destroy vehicles containing kidnapped civilians. And of course, that is who would be in them. The raid was not intended to defeat the Israeli military. The raid was intended to kidnap people and use them for leverage, use them to negotiate. And Israel said, kill them anyway. The article goes on and says there has been other evidence of Israeli forces implementing the Hannibal directive on October 7th.
Well, Tom, hey, hang on.
Including a January report.
Sorry. Hey, Tom says no one covers news like this. Listen, Tom, that's not actually true, because the only reason I even know about this is Nick talked about it last night. So again, I really encourage people to watch Nick's show. Nick is now doing his show at a consistent time. It's 9 p.m. Eastern time. You can find him on Rumble. You can find him on Cozy. He actually just got verified on Rumble, finally. And so this isn't my story. I'm just playing this because I was so shocked listening to Nick talk about this last night that I was like, I need to make other people suffer too. So I appreciate the compliment, but this came from Nick and this came from antiwar.com. And so I didn't really have anything to do with this other than choosing to play the video.
Report from the Israeli news site Ynet. The report said that about 70 vehicles were destroyed by the Israeli military as they were on their way back to Gaza. So presumably, let's say there's an average of one kidnapped civilian in every vehicle, but probably there were more. That's at least 70 civilians out of 1,200. At least. So it could be that 10%, maybe more, of the dead civilians, even given the official number, were killed by Israel itself.
So let's just do a little thought experiment. We've had people like Ben Shapiro and Douglas Murray and Dave Rubin and all of the other people running around ever since October 7th saying, oh, is Biden starting a press conference? Should we go to, what is Biden's press conference about? Should we do breaking news? Should we go to Biden's press conference? I'll do it if you guys want me to. One in the chat if you want me to go to Biden's press conference. I don't even know what it's about. Let's just do it. Let's be responsible. We can come back to Nick later and let's just check in on Biden real quick.
If they attack one of us, they'll be attacked by all of us. Sending that message is the best way to deter aggression and prevent wars in the first place. For those who thought NATO's time had passed, they got a rude awakening when Putin invaded Ukraine. Some of the oldest and deepest fears in Europe roared back to life because once again, a murderous madman was on the march. But this time, no one cowered in appeasement, especially the United States. We collected intelligence that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine months before the invasion. I directed the intelligence community to be a significant amount of intelligence to be declassified so I could start building an international coalition to oppose the invasion. Then in February, some of you remember, I warned the world that the invasion was imminent. I rallied a coalition of 50 nations from Europe to Asia to help Ukraine defend itself. Many foreign policy experts thought, as Putin amassed Russian forces just 100 miles north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, but Putin thought it was the mother home of Russia. The capital would fall in less than a week. But the Ukrainian people, backed by a coalition to help build, stopped them. Today, Kyiv still stands, and NATO stands stronger than it has ever been. During the week of this summit, several heads of states made it a point in their statements to thank the United States and to thank me personally for all that NATO has achieved. NATO is not only stronger, NATO is bigger because we led the charge to bring in Finland and Sweden into the alliance, and it makes a gigantic difference. Excuse me. Meanwhile, my predecessor has made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." In fact, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine, here's what he said. It was genius. It was wonderful. Some of you forgot that, but that's exactly what he said. But I made it clear, a strong NATO is essential to American security. And I believe the obligation of Article 5 is sacred. And I would remind all Americans, Article 5 is invoked only once in NATO's long history, and that was to defend America after 9/11. I made it clear that I will not bow down to Putin. I will not walk away from Ukraine. I will keep NATO strong. That's exactly what we did, and exactly what we'll continue to do.
So what? What do you want, Biden?
The future of American policy is up to the American people. This is much more than the political question. It's more than that. It's a national security issue.
Why are we having a press conference over this?
Don't reduce this to the usual testament that people talk about, issues of being a political campaign. It's far too important. It's about the world we live in for decades to come. Every American must ask herself or himself, is the world safer with NATO?
No.
Are you safer?
No.
Is your family safer?
No.
I believe the American people know. The answer to all those questions is yes.
No.
And I believe the American people understand that America is stronger because of our alliances. I believe the American consensus from Truman to Reagan to me still holds today. America cannot retreat from the world. We must lead the world. We're our indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright wrote. Now let me turn to three other key issues. Just this morning, we had a great economic report showing inflation is down. Overall prices fell last month. Core inflation is the lowest it's been in 3 years. Prices are falling for cars, appliances, and airfares. Grocery prices have fallen since the start of the year. We're going to keep working to take down corporate greed to bring those prices down further. Meanwhile, Trump's calling for a 10% tariff on everything Americans buy, including food from overseas, vegetables, and other necessities. And economists tell us that would cost the average American working family another $2,500 a year. It's a tax of $2,500 a year. Second, our efforts to secure the border, southern border, is working. After Trump killed the bipartisan effort to secure the border, Republicans and Democrats had worked on, because he thought it would benefit me and make him a loser, Republicans walked away. So I took executive action last month. As a consequence, working with Mexico, border encounters have gone down over 50%. The current level is lower today than when Trump left office. Third, for months,
Yeah, okay, sure.
the United States has been working to secure a
Biden.
ceasefire in Gaza, to bring the hostages home, to create a path for peace and stability in the Middle East. 6 weeks ago, I laid out a detailed plan in writing. It was endorsed by the UN Security Council, the G7. That framework is now agreed on by both Israel and Hamas. So I sent my team to the region to hammer out the details. These are difficult, complex issues. There's still gaps to close. We're making progress. The trend is positive, and I'm determined to get this deal done and bring an end to this war, which should end now. Let me conclude where I began. We're the United States of America. We are the indispensable nation. Our leadership matters. Our partnerships matter. This moment matters. We must rise to meet it. With that, I'll take your questions. I've been given a list of people to call on here.
Oh, good. He's been given a list.
Reuters,
It is a
Jeff
press
Mason.
conference. Hang on.
Mr. President, your political future has hung over the NATO summit a little bit this week. Speaker Pelosi made a point of suggesting that your decision on whether to stay in the race was still open. George Clooney and a handful of lawmakers have called on you to step aside. Reuters is reporting tonight that UAW leadership is concerned about your ability to win.
UAW just endorsed me, but go ahead.
Thank you. My question for you is, how are you incorporating these developments into your decision to stay? And separately, what concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she's not qualified to be president.
He just called
start
Kamala
there.
Harris Donald Trump.
Number one.
He just
The
called
fact is
Kamala
that-
Trump.
The consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now,
Yes.
later in the campaign.
He did. He
So
said
there's a
Vice
long way to
President
go
Trump. Yeah, he did.
in this campaign. And so I'm just going to keep moving. And because, look, I got more work to do. We got more work to finish. There's so much, we made so much progress. Think about it. Think about where we are economically relative to the rest of the world. Name me a world leader who wouldn't want to trade places with our economy. We've created over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 1.5 million jobs. I mean, so things are moving. We got more to go. Working class people still need help. Corporate greed is still at large. Their prices, the corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. They're coming down. And so I'm optimistic about where things are going. Danny Kemp, AFP.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about you mixed up Presidents Zelensky and Putin earlier today. And you now have sort of your key allies, including the British Prime Minister, the President of France, the German Chancellor having to step in and make excuses for you on that. Officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing by leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, here, I mean, Putin. I said, oh, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names. Look, guys, the idea anybody
Okay, that I mix
suggests
up names all the time.
that we haven't had an incredibly successful conference. How many times did you hear in that conference, I know it sounds too self-serving, but other leaders, heads of state, in thanking me, saying the reason we're together is because of Biden, because Biden did the following. Look, folks, this is, well, anyway, I thought it was the most successful conference I've attended in a long time, and find me a world leader who didn't think it was. Next one. Sorry, Nancy Cordes, CBS.
Oh, this is great.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned other instances in history where presidents have faced a challenge, but what makes this moment in history so unique is that it is not your enemies who are calling on you to reconsider your decision to stay in the race. It's your friends, supporters, people who think you've done a great job over the past 4 years. Have you spent time thinking about what it would mean for your legacy, which you've worked decades to build, if you stay in the race, despite the concerns that voters say they have?
The press is like,
and
just
you lose
drop
to
out
someone
Biden. They're
who
like
you
begging
yourself have
him to
argued
just
is
like be
unfit to
reasonable.
return to the Oval Office.
Well, look, I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started. As you recall, understandably, many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward, can't do that, it's going to cause inflation, things are going to skyrocket, the debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now from mainstream economists? 16 economic Nobel laureates said I've done a hell of a job. That under my plans so far and what's going to happen in the future if I'm reelected, that things are going to get much better. Our economy is growing. I was determined when I got elected to stop the trickle-down economic theory, that if the wealthy did very well, everybody else would do well. My dad was a well-read, decent guy. I don't remember much trickling down on his kitchen table. Middle-class people and working-class people need help. And so what happened is I decided to was able to implement as president what I believed when I was a senator. And that is that the way to build this economy is from the middle out and the bottom up. That way we grow the economy. And the wealthy still do very well. They do fine. And guess what? Find me a mainstream economist who said we haven't done well. What have we not done that isn't working right now? And so we got more to do, though. We got to finish the job. And by the way, I come from the corporate state of the world. Delaware has more corporations registered in Delaware than every other state in the nation combined. I'm not anti-corporate, but corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic, doubled. It's time things get back in order a little bit. It's time, for example, if I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that rents are kept at 5% increase of corporate rents for apartments and the like and homes are limited to 5%. We're going to make a lot of changes that I've been talking about because we're going to continue to grow this economy. And by the way, remember how I got so roundly criticized for being so pro-union, not labor, union. Well, guess what? I've been the most pro-union labor president in history. Not a joke. And guess what? We had the Treasury Department do a study. When unions do better, everybody does better. Everybody does better.
As a reminder, unions are controlled by socialists.
Remember when we talked about getting the computer chip industry back in the United States? Used to be 40% of the industry. We invented the chip. 40% of the industry was in the United States. And former presidents decided that the best way to do it is find the cheapest labor in the world, send the product over there and import what the product was. And so what did I do? I was told not to go over to Europe, to Asia, including Europe, but Asia. And I remember going to South Korea, convincing them to invest $20 billion in the United States to build computer chip factories. And I asked why when they finally decided to do it. And the answer was because you have the safest economy in the world and you have the best workers in the world. So the whole idea here is...
Hang on.
We've
Hang in there. We're going to hit gold. It's going to be fine. Meds are wearing off.
Manufacturing just coming in a bean. None of you thought that would happen. None of you thought that would happen. But it's happening. It's happening. And it's going to grow economies. All through, and by the way, red states and blue states. Matter of fact, there's as much in red states as blue states. I've made no distinction. So my generic point is that the idea that we can't continue to build and grow the economy, make it fairer. And like I said, from my standpoint, when the middle class does well, that's when the whole economy grows. The poor have a shot, the wealthy do well, but the wealthy got to start paying their taxes.
As a follow-up, sir, you mentioned that your Vice President Kamala Harris would be ready to serve on day one. Can you elaborate on that?
Biden looks like he's
What
gonna
is
fall
it about
asleep.
her attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary?
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies.
She's going to
Secondly, her
legalize
ability to
abortion.
handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate, she was really good. I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning, I made no bones about that. She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her. Felicia Schwartz, Financial Times.
Thank you, Mr. President. Presidency is the most straining job in the world, and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for that next year, in 2 years, in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
The limits I've acknowledged I have?
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and your evening around 8.
That's not true. Look, what I said was, instead of my every day starting at 7 and going to bed at midnight, it'd be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting the fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock. People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you looked at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full bore. I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball? I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing. And I have,
He hasn't had
I
his
don't know how
job for
many.
4 years,
I've
Joe.
come
What do you
home to
want?
Roughly
He's
20 major
retired.
events. Someone with thousands
Trump
of people
doesn't have to
showing
do
up.
anything. He's not the president.
And so I just think it's better. I always have an inclination, whether I was playing sports or doing politics, just to keep going, not stop. I just got to just pace myself a little more. Pace myself. And the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling into 15 time zones a week before.
Thanks, Kristen. Appreciate
Anyway,
it.
that-
Yeah,
that's
the next
what it was
debate will
about.
definitely be better.
That's what it's about.
Oh,
And by the way,
yeah.
even with that, I love my staff, but they add things all the time. At the very end, I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway.
Yeah, we know that, Joe.
I'm sorry.
Oh, so
Zeke
true.
Miller,
Brucey.
Associated Press.
So true.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Or V.
2 questions for you. First, on the NATO summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to lift your limitations on the Ukrainian use of American weapons, saying that, in his public remarks afterwards, saying that Ukraine cannot win the war unless those limitations are lifted. Are you reconsidering your position on that? And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people that you are up to the task and that there won't be more bad nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
First thing about Zelensky asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We've allowed
Just fell asleep.
Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term and the near abroad into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not. If he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't. The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has, the weaponry we're getting to him. I've gotten a more long-range capacity, as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is where I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. And we're making a day-to-day basis on what they should and shouldn't go, how far they should go in. That's a logical thing to do. Second question related to
bad nights, sir. How can you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage or it's a matter of foreign policy?
Well, I tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself. And that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's gotten more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? I created 2,000 jobs just last week. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None.
There's no indication of that?
What I got here?
None? Like the debate? Like the fact you couldn't remember a question that was asked for you 2 seconds ago?
Pulaski Radio.
Wow.
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well.
The elections in the US have consequences around the world. You have pretty high standing in Europe. I just asked President Macron about you, and he said we are happy to have him as the President of the United States. But there is a concern. Many people in Poland and across Europe are worried that the former president may win the election. And there's a lot of concern that Donald Trump may weaken NATO, stop supporting Ukraine, or push Ukraine to give up territories to Russia.
They're correct.
And yourself was warning just 2 minutes ago about it. So my question is, do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders?
Pull yourselves up by your bootstraps and do it yourself. We don't fool you, bro. We are not responsible for Europe. Why are we responsible for all of Europe?
How can I say this without
We fought a war over this. We're not
too
responsible for Europe.
I'm not having any of my European allies come up to me and say, Joe, don't run. What I hear them say is, you've got to win. You can't let this guy come forward. He'd be a disaster.
You've got to win, Biden.
It'd be a disaster.
You've got to do it for us, bro.
I mean, I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you from Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine, that that's going to be the end of it. And so what I can say is, I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO. I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do, we couldn't be in Eastern Europe, et cetera. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine, because you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. No, that's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? Because in my office, I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked. He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help? And I did. It wasn't automatic. And then I got a call from the Swedes. I beg your pardon? And so Finland joined NATO. 800-mile border is a significant, and they were already allies, but they weren't part of NATO. And you heard, I think you heard, maybe I can't recall what he said in public there in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind it being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability to be together to dissuade any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. It took a lot of selling to some folks, particularly in Turkey and other places, to agree to the expansion. But it expanded. And we're a hell of a lot stronger because of it. We're more secure because of it. And by the way, I was able to get 50 other nations, 50, to support Ukraine. 50. And we're able to bring about a coalition of Europe and Asia, Japan and South Korea. I just we talked about AUKUS, and we talked about the relationship between Australia, New Zealand,
What is he even talking about?
Japan, South Korea, the United States. We're making the world safer and stronger because we have to deal with the new arrangement that exists in the world.
That's not our job.
The Cold War is over. The post-war era is over. What is going to replace it? And I respectfully suggest I have a pretty good idea what that should be. I'm convinced a lot of people will follow it, and we're just going to get stronger. David Sanger.
Yeah, you know the thing. Exactly, Angel Eyes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Be nice, David.
Mr. President, the NATO declaration that was issued yesterday was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. That's part of a broader partnership that seems to have cemented in place in the past 2 or 3 years. I think one that you were a little bit doubtful of when we asked you about it some time ago. So I'd be interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia, and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe that strategy to us. And along the way, could you also tell us whether you think, just to follow up on Felicia's question, that if you were in a room with Vladimir Putin again, the way you were 3 years ago, or with President Xi, that a few years from now, you will be able to go negotiate with them, handle them one-on-one?
Well, the first part of the question is, we discussed and I raised in the NATO summit, and others raised, the future of China's involvement, what they're going to do, what they're doing with Russia in terms of accommodating, facilitating them. They're getting access to additional, they're not supplying weapons themselves, they're supplying mechanisms for them to be able to get weapons. And China's position is basically, and I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader has, over 90 hours since being vice president all the way through, for real. And by the way, I handed all my notes. But my point is that Xi believes that China is a large enough market that they can entice any country, including European countries, to invest there in return for commitments from Europe to do A, B, C, or D, or not to do certain things. What's happened is we had a long discussion about what we have to make clear. China has to understand that if they are supplying Russia with information and capacity, along with working with North Korea and others to help Russia in armament, that they're not going to benefit economically as a consequence of that by getting the kind of investment they're looking for. And so, for example, we're in a situation where we've reestablished direct contact with China after that, remember the balloon, quote unquote, going down, and all of a sudden things came to an end? Well, we set up a new mechanism. There's a direct line between she and me, and our military has direct access to one another, and they contact one another when we have problems. The issue is that we have to make sure that she understands there's a price to pay for undercutting both.
Right. I don't really care about this
the
stuff, but we're
Pacific
watching
Basin
for a Biden
as
laugh.
well as
We're watching for comedy.
Europe,
Sometimes
and
we
it
have to
relates
sit through
to
bullshit.
Russia and dealing with Ukraine. And so we, for example, if you want to invest in China, as you know this area really well. If you want to invest in China, you have to have a 51% Chinese owner. You have to make sure that you do by their rules. And you don't have the authority, and you have to provide all access to all the data and information you have. There was a while there, as you recall, the last administration and other administrations, where the access to that market was enticing enough to get companies to come in because they had access to over 1 billion people in the a market, not 1 billion, but a lot of people in the market. And so they were doing it. But that got curtailed when we started saying we're going to play by the same rules. For example, the idea they don't abide by the international rules related to subsidizing products by the government funding. So guess what? They're not going to be able to export their electric vehicles to the United States without a significant tariff. Others are doing the same thing around the world. But it is a concern. It is a concern that you have both China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, countries that are not necessarily coordinated in the past, looking to figure out how they can have impact.
Interrupt that impact?
Yes, I do, but I'm not prepared to talk about the detail of it in public. And I think you'll see that some of our European friends are going to be curtailing their investment in Russia. In China, as long as
Confusing Russia
China
and
continues
China.
to have this
Good
indirect
progress.
help to Russia in terms of being able to help their economy as well as help them in as a consequence that their ability to fight in Ukraine. The other thing that we talked a lot about is that, and I raised it, and I didn't hear any. I can't swear that everyone agreed because not everyone got to talk about it. But we need a new industrial policy in the West. For example, we talked about how both the EU as well as NATO has to be able to begin to build their own munition capacity, has to be able to generate their own capacity to provide for weapons and the ability to, it came as a surprise to some of us how we had fallen behind in the West in terms of the ability to construct new material, new weaponry, new everything from vehicles to weapon systems. And so one of the things that came out of this was we're going to be meeting again with a number of my colleagues, my European colleagues, is what do we do to increase the capacity of the West, particularly in Europe and Japan, to be able to generate the kind of ability to produce their own weapon systems. Not just for themselves, but to be able to generate that. It's the same, that's what Russia's trying to figure out, that they went to China and they didn't get the weapons, but then they went to North Korea. But we're going to be in a position where the West is going to become the industrial base for it to be able to, the ability to have all the defensive weapons that we need. That was a discussion as well.
I'm not sure you answered on whether you would be ready to go deal with Putin and Xi 2 or 3 years from now.
I'm ready to deal with them now and 3 years from now. Look, like I said, I'm dealing with Xi right now and direct contact with him. I have no good reason to talk to Putin right now. There's not much that he is prepared to do in terms of accommodating any change in his behavior. And but there isn't any world leader I'm not prepared to deal with. But I understand that the generic point is Putin ready to talk? I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior. And the idea, look, Putin's got a problem. First of all, in this war that he is supposedly have won, and by the way, I think, don't hold me to the exact number, but I think Russia had 17.3% of Ukraine that they've conquered. Now it's 17.4. I mean, in terms of percentage of territory. They've not been very successful. They've caused horrible damage, loss of life, but they've also lost over 350,000 troops, military, killed or wounded. They have over 1 million people, particularly young people with technical capability, leaving Russia because they see no future there. They've got a problem. But what they do have control of is they are very good at controlling and running the public outcry that relates to how they use mechanisms to communicate with people. They lie like hell to the constituencies. They lie like hell about what's going on. And so the idea that we're going to be able to fundamentally change Russia in the near term is not likely. But one thing for certain, if we allow Russia to succeed in Ukraine, they're not stopping in Ukraine. I recommend, I know you know this because you've written about it, read Putin's speech after they moved in, what it was all about in Kyiv. It wasn't about just, anyway, read what his objective is. And anyway, but so I think that I'm prepared to talk to any leader who wants to talk, including if Putin called me and wanted to talk. Last time I talked to Putin was trying to get him to work on an arms control agreement related to nuclear weapons in space. That didn't go very far. So my point is, I'm prepared to talk to anybody, but I don't see any inclination. There is an inclination on the part of the Chinese to keep in contact with me because they're not sure where this all goes. And look what's happened in Asia. We have strengthened the Asian Pacific area more than anyone else has. We just put together with, today I brought on, I asked our NATO allies that we bring on the group from the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Australia. I already mentioned Australia. And I met twice now, I think, with the 14 leaders of the Pacific Island nations. And we've slowed down what's going on there. We've slowed down China's reach. But there's a lot of work to do. This is a moving target, and I don't take it lightly. Sam from NPR.
NPR.
Thank you,
Come on,
Mr. President.
real question.
Asma Khalid with NPR. I have two questions. Earlier, you spoke about the ceasefire plan between Israel and Hamas. We're now looking at 10 months of war, and I'm curious if there's anything that you feel personally you wish you would have done differently over the course of the war. And then secondly, if I may, I wanted to ask you about your presidential campaign. I remember covering your campaign in 2020, and there was a moment where you referred to yourself as a, quote, bridge candidacy, a transition to a younger generation of leaders. I want to understand what changed.
Two things. Let's go back to when you talked about would I have changed anything that's happening with Israel and the Palestinians and the Palestinian movement. The answer is, as you recall, from the very beginning, I went to Israel, but I also got immediate contact with al-Sisi in Egypt. I met with the King of Jordan. I met with...
We're literally watching it, bro. What are you doing?
To try to get a consensus
What's on the
going
screen?
as to what had to be done to deal with getting more aid and food and medicine into into the Gaza Strip. And we pushed it really hard. And Israel occasionally was less than cooperative, number one. The Israeli War Cabinet, I've been dealing with Israel since Golda Meir. I've saw some of the reporters around here come here all the time and heard me say this. The first time I met with Golda Meir, I sat across from her at her desk, and her assistant was Rabin sitting next to me.
Hey,
that's how far back I go.
it has
I know
it in
Israel
the
well,
images. It looks
and I
cool
support
though,
Israel.
right?
But this war cabinet is one of the most conservative war cabinets in the history of Israel. And there's no ultimate answer other than a two-state solution here. And so what was able to be done in terms of the plan I put together was it would be a process for a two-state solution. And we get the Arab nations to, particularly from Egypt all the way to Saudi Arabia, to be in a position where they would cooperate in the transition so that they could keep the peace in Gaza without Israeli forces
This is
staying in
live
Gaza.
right now.
The question has been from the beginning, what's the day after in Gaza? And the day after in Gaza has to be, the end of the day after has to be no occupation by Israel on the Gaza Strip.
Bro, it's on
as
the
well
page
as
you
the
bought it
ability
on.
for us to
It's literally all, you
access,
should have looked.
get in and out as rapidly as you
images of it
can,
on that
all
page.
that's needed there. I've been disappointed that some of the things that I've put forward have not succeeded as well, like the port reattached from Cyprus. I was hopeful that would be more successful. But that's why when I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas, that the one thing I said to the Israelis, and I met with the War Cabinet and with Bibi, don't make the same mistake America made after bin Laden. There's no need to occupy anywhere. Go after the people who did the job. You may recall, I still get criticized for it, but I was totally opposed to the occupation and trying to unite Afghanistan. Once we got bin Laden, we should have moved on, because it was not no one's ever going to unite that country. I've been over every inch of that, not every inch, the entirety from the poppy fields all the way to the north.
So
Don't
true.
make the
Thank
same
you for the
mistake
super
we
chat.
made.
I'm like, fingers
Don't
crossed.
think that's what you should be doing, is doubling down. We'll help you find the bad guys, Sinwar and company. And all this criticism about I wouldn't provide when the weapons they needed. I'm not providing them 2,000-pound bombs. They cannot be used in Gaza or any populated area without causing great human tragedy and damage. But remember what happened when you had the attack on Israel with rockets and ballistic missiles. I was able to unite the Arab nations as well as Europe, and nothing happened. Nothing got hurt. It sent an incredible lesson to what was going on from the Middle East. So there's a lot of things, in retrospect, I wish I had been able to convince the Israelis to do. But the bottom line is we have a chance now. It's time to end this war. Doesn't mean walk away from going after Sinwar and Hamas. And if you notice, you know better than most, there is a growing dissatisfaction on the West Bank from the Palestinians about Hamas. Hamas is not popular now. And so there's a lot of moving parts.
Really?
I just have to keep moving to make sure that we get as much done as we can toward a ceasefire, and get those. And by the way, look at the numbers in Israel. I mean, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. But then again, they're better than a lot of other people here too. But
really?
Anyway,
Your numbers are better in Israel than they are in America, Joe? Really?
Candidacy in 2020, you referred to yourself as being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders. And I wanted to know what changed.
What changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited in terms of the economy, our foreign policy, and domestic division. And I think, I won't put words in anybody's mouth. Most presidential historians give me credit for having accomplished more than most any president since Johnson and maybe before that to get major pieces of legislation passed. And what I realized was my long time in the Senate had equipped me to have the wisdom to know how to deal with the Congress to get things done. We got more major legislation passed that no one thought would happen. And I want to finish it, to get that finished. If tomorrow, if we had a circumstance where there was a lineup and I hadn't inherited what I did and we just moved things along, anyway, it's going to change.
Last question.
Haley Bull, Scripps. Or no, Josh Weingrove, I'm sorry, was the next one. I'll do 2 more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many of your colleagues, Democrats in the Hill, are watching tonight as they assess what they want to say about your candidacy. I'm wondering how you're thinking of this right now. It seems like your answer is clear, but they're watching how things go tonight, tomorrow in Michigan, next week in Texas and Nevada. Are you thinking that way about how the next week or 2 goes would inform you?
Am I using that way?
Are you thinking that way about how the next 2 weeks go? Will that affect your decision, or are you fully determined on running in November as the party's nominee?
I'm determined on running, but I think it's important that I allay fears by let them see me out there. Let me see them out. For the longest time it was, Biden's not prepared to sit with us unscripted. Biden's not prepared to, anyway.
Isn't that the truth? We're
And
friends
so
again.
what I'm doing is, and I've been doing, I think we've done over 20 major events from Wisconsin to North Carolina to demonstrate that I'm going out in the areas where we think we can win, where we can persuade people to move our way, or people are already there. And then look, the other thing is, we have the most extensive campaign organization of anybody's had in a long, long time. We have well over 1,000 volunteers knocking on doors, making phone calls, making tens of thousands of phone calls.
Now I kind of want
We
to
have headquarters. I forget exactly how many. I want to cite a number and then find out I'm off. But we have scores of headquarters in all the toss-up states. We're organized. We're moving, and that's awful hard to replace in the near term. And here's the other thing. I was in the Senate a long time. Very proud of what I've done in the Senate. I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee for a long time, and I was chairman or ranking member and chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library. I'm going to be going around making the case of the things that I think we have to finish and how we can't afford to lose what we've done or backslide on civil rights, civil liberties, women's rights. There's that little button we have. Control guns, not girls. I mean, the idea we're sitting around, this is where Kamala's so good as well. We're sitting around, more children are killed by a bullet than any other cause of death. The United States of America. What the hell are we doing?
What?
What are we doing? We got a candidate saying,
Completely
promising, don't worry, I'm
unprompted.
not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. You got a Supreme Court that is what you might call the most conservative court in American history. This is ridiculous. There's so much we can do still, and I'm determined to get it done. It's about freedom. And by the way, I'll end this. Well, I'm not going to do that. Haley has to come up too. But I remember I made a speech on democracy in Philadelphia at Independence Hall.
Yes, where you look like Hitler.
And I'm not being critical, just observing. The bulk of the press, what the hell is he talking about that for? Democracy. You did. Democracy is not an issue. Democracy is not an issue. Except the polling data shows 60% of the people knew I was right.
Apologize.
Thought I was
It's very
right.
rude of me.
I'm not asking you a question. You don't have to answer, obviously. But do you think our democracy is under siege
Yes.
based on this court?
Yes.
Do you think democracy is
Well, not
under
based on the
siege
court,
based on
but
Project
other things.
2025?
No.
Do you think he means what he says when he says he's going to do away with the civil service, eliminate the Department of Education? Make sure.
Oh, please, God, let him eliminate the
never
Department of
been here
Education.
before. And that's the other reason why I
We've never
didn't
been here
before.
Education.
And that's the other reason why I
That'd be
didn't
great.
say hand off to another generation. I've got to finish this job.
Yep.
I've got to finish this job because there's so much at stake.
We've had some discussions over the past few days with your press secretary about the question of health exams. And you said you take a cognitive test every day in this job. Are you open to taking another physical or test before the election?
Like
Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for
an
instance, said it
actual
wouldn't hurt
cognitive
to take a test.
Well, look, two things. One, I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist. In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity to decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember with the staff, I said, I'm going to go to South Korea. We're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand it. You know, the only thing age does is help you with it. Creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is, I think it's important that if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out. Hadn't hidden a thing. You want to ask Trump for his, okay?
Well,
I laid it all out. And every single day, I'm surrounded by good docs. If they think there's a problem, I promise you, or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it. But no one's suggesting that to me now. And I'll ask you another question. No matter what I did, no one's going to be satisfied. Did you have 7 docs? Did you have 2? Who'd you have? Did you do this? How many times? So I am not opposed if my doctors tell me I should have another neurological exam, I'll do it. But that's where I am. Haley Bull, Scripps.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis when it comes to support for Ukraine. Does that mean you have not closed the door on further considering lifting restrictions for U.S.-made weapons inside Russia? And if I may, your convention is coming up where your delegates are pledged to make you the official nominee. If they have second thoughts, are they free to vote their conscience?
Ooh.
Obviously, they're free to do whatever they want, but I get overwhelming support. Overwhelming support. I won, I forget how many votes I won in the primary. Overwhelming. And so tomorrow, if all of a sudden I show up at the convention, everybody says, we want somebody else, that's the democratic process. It's not going to happen.
Even if that means they vote for someone else?
Sure. Look, I'll end this with this. I served in the Senate a long time. I understand the impetus of candidates running for local office and whether they think the topic can help them or not. In my state of Delaware, which was a very, at least it was a red state when I started, in terms of we now talk red and blue. I don't recall most of the Democratic presidents winning my state when I was a candidate. The truth of the matter is I understand the self-interest of every candidate. If they think that, running with Biden at the top is going to hurt them, then they're going to run away. I get it. But so far, go and look at the polling data in their states. Look at the in-depth, and by the way, I think you'd all acknowledge, and you're all experts. I'm not being solicitous about the president. You're experts on this stuff. How accurate does anybody think the polls are these days? I can give you a series of polls where you have likely voters, me versus Trump, where I win all the time. When the unlikely voters vote, he wins sometimes. So bottom line is all the polling data right now, which I think is premature because the campaign really hasn't even started. I mean, it
Campaign
hasn't
hasn't
started.
started? What are you
Most of the time, it
talking
doesn't start
about?
till after September, after Labor Day. So a lot can happen.
The campaign's not
But
starting
I
until
think
September?
I'm the best I believe I'm the best qualified to govern. And I think I'm the best qualified to win. But there are other people who could beat Trump too. But it's also start from scratch. And, you know, we talk about, you know, money raised. We're not doing bad. We got about $220 million in the bank. We're doing well. So with that, do you have any want to follow up on any of that you just asked me?
Yes. You earlier explained confidence in your
look at her
vice
nose.
president.
Yes.
Oh,
If
that's
your team came
unfortunate.
back and showed you data
Oh.
that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that.
Why is he whispering? That's so
Thanks.
creepy.
This ends tonight's
That was the creepiest thing ever.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh. That was the creepiest whisper ever.
You misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age and your memory. How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
Listen to him.
This concludes tonight's press conference. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
Holy shit! That stolen microphone at the end was the best. Listen to him. That fucking Joe Biden just told us to go listen to Donald Trump mock him about confusing Kamala Harris with Donald Trump. Wow. But guys, don't worry, because according to Joe Biden, the presidential campaign hasn't really started yet. It is not going to start for a couple more months. We are so fucked. We're so fucked. We are so fucked. But you know, guys, this is why you just need to embrace the insanity, and you need to embrace. Here's my philosophy on these things. You need to embrace our inevitable demise because we are so fucked. Like, you just need to accept that it is foobar beyond all control. There is no fixing this problem. The very best that we can hope for is laughing at the insanity and entertaining ourselves as we descend into the socialist Marxist utopia that is inevitable in about 15 years, given the way that everything is going and no one's paying attention to it and no one's doing anything about it. And so we are effed. And so, you know, we might as well create as much entertainment for ourselves as possible is just my general strategy at the moment. And you know, there's a peace that comes over you when you accept the state of affairs, when you accept that well, it's good to be at peace with the situation in which you find ourselves, because most of us have no control over any of this and there's nothing we can do about it. And so the best thing that we can do about it is just, you know, just roll with it and laugh as much as possible and enjoy good friends while we still can. And yep, this is pretty accurate right now, Kyle. This is like it's in my head right now. And that's just yeah, I'm gonna miss capitalism too. Not owning anything is gonna suck, and it's gonna be fine. Gonna be fine. There'll probably be good drugs. All right. Well, we were watching Nick Fuentes earlier. I don't want to go back to that now. I feel like you guys really got the point of the Hannibal directive stuff, which again is just like shocking and horrifying to me. But Nick's show should be starting in half an hour. Hopefully he has some comments on the press conference today. And again, guys, I do want to encourage everyone, watch it. Like if you feel so inclined, if you don't feel so inclined to watch a show, fine. But like I really do think that Nick Fuentes is doing some of the best commentary on the internet today. And it's okay not to agree with him on everything, and it's okay not to like everything he says. It really is like, I mean, the Groypers know that I disagree with them on things and they don't care. The link, you can find him on Rumble under Nick J. Fuentes, Nicholas J. Fuentes, or you can find him on Cozy TV, cozytv.com/Nick, I think. Or you can just go on the homepage and find him. But it usually should start around, it's 8 p.m. Central Time, so it's 9 o'clock Eastern Time. No, Nick is not on YouTube. He is on Rumble and he's on Cozy. And so you can find him there, and I definitely recommend people tune in, and we will see if Nick keeps the excellent tie selection streak going. Again, I'm really hopeful. Nick's tie yesterday looked pretty good. Hang on, let's just see it one more time. Nick's tie yesterday looked good. That's not a good freeze frame in Nick. Hang on. We'll get a better freeze. There, that's better. That's better. Okay. That Nick's tie looked good yesterday. It was a gold tie. He wore a black tie, I think, or a dark green tie with stripes the day before that. I really like that tie a lot. And so we are shooting for a 3-day in a row excellent tie selection from Nick. And that way he can sail into Casual Friday, where he wears like a flannel or a hoodie and he dresses down on Friday. So we don't have to worry about the tie selection on Friday. But everyone cross our fingers. Let's send him positive vibes as he selects the tie that he's going to wear in half an hour. And I'll be back at 5 p.m. tomorrow for happy hour. We do woke trainings on Fridays where we get some beer and we watch a woke training from start to finish. So if you want to see what the left is saying behind closed doors, stop by. We will show you and we'll have some fun. And I will show you things no one else on the internet is showing you in terms of what the left is doing. This is not stuff you'll see on Libs of TikTok. This is not stuff you'll see on any of your other conservative media outlets. But if you want to, if Nick is the one with the 82,000 followers. It should have a check mark on it. So if you want to see what the left is really doing and how effed we really are, come to happy hour tomorrow at 5 p.m. Guys, please make sure you are subscribed on whatever channel you're watching on, whether that be YouTube or X or Rumble. Thank you for the super sticker as we head out. Hey, hit the super chat goal for the day. So thank you guys for that. I really do appreciate it. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your night. We'll see you soon. Bye.